Hey guys, welcome to Politically Provoked, an interactive podcast where we host debates, panels, and interviews. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell to keep up to date with all our future debates and panels. So I am your host, Brittany, and this is my co-host, Todd. How are you?
Doing good, Britt. How are you?
Doing good. All right, so tonight we are going to be debating China versus the West. And we got two very lively people, and this should be a good one. They had a little bit of a Twitter back and forth, which I'm sure is going to end really well for somebody. So let's bring on our guests. First up, let's bring on Superpower Broadcasting. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me here. It's interesting. I think a lot of people have been waiting to see me and Haas debate for months, basically since like February. So let's go. Let's flip and go.
Glad we're able to do this. So yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you.
Wonderful. Yeah. So thanks for bringing me on here. It's always down to debate. So I'm Kevin Castley. I run the channel Superpower Broadcasting. At the moment, you can find me on Twitch. I stream to Twitch every day. I also run a YouTube channel. Unfortunately, at the moment, the YouTube channel is down because we've been spammed with frivolous copyright claims over TikToks that were posted by a former political partner of mine who, after we discovered was basically a fascist, we had kicked them out of our community. And they've posted TikToks calling for the death of atheists. We reacted to those. They've spammed copyright infringement against us. So the channel's probably going to be down for a little while, unfortunately. But you can keep up with me over on Twitch in the meantime. That's Superpower Broadcasting. As far as my political position, I'm pretty socially liberal, a little bit right of center on a lot of economic stuff. And I am very, very much proactive and hawkish in a foreign policy dimension in terms of assuring and securing Western liberal hegemony throughout the world so that all people, regardless of where they're born, can be given the same opportunities and freedoms and rights as any of us that were privileged enough to be born in the West. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Haas. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know what I'm saying? Ready to put some beta males in their place, if you know what I mean. But, you know, I'm Haas. Marxist Leninism in the age of multipolarity and the post-COVID world. Never paid anyone in my life to debate, but Kevin made that up. We're going to address that claim too. Basically, my position is basically this. So we're entering a multipolar era, right? It's not about morality, about what we should or shouldn't do. It's about, can you wake up and get with the program, or are you going to keep coping like our friend Kevin Castley? So Kevin, actually, me and Kevin, let me get some background story. We actually have a history of some sort, right? So I'm gonna break it down like this. Kevin and his 5 friends, right? He's a 2-viewer Andy, right? So he's like nobody. So his 5 friends were harassing me all day, like endlessly, right? Nonstop, to debate me. And I had a protocol in place that you got to debate the Discord first, because the Sansol guy, he was doing fucked up shit. So he made us put that in place. So I finally agreed to debate him. And then he wanted to watch CNN instead. So he lost his opportunity. He lost his chance. But not only did he say he's going to debate me, he said he's going to dictate the terms. But you know what I mean? Like, what leverage does he have? He's a 2-viewer Andy. Nobody even knows who he is. So it ended there. He basically took the L. He ran away from me. But I've been debating on Politically Provoked, and I debate a whole lot of irrelevant people. You know, does a very good job moderating, does a very good job filtering people. So when I heard that he wanted to debate on this platform and he let go of his delusion that he was going to dictate platforms and that it was going to be on his show, I said, sure, why not? And here we are. And now we're going to see what Kevin is made of and whether all of that energy he was putting into all that time before and on Twitter where he's typing with his hands on his keyboard, we're going to see what Kevin is really made of here. So I'm excited.
As opposed to typing with your feet, Haas? Is that what you type with?
Or how about speaking like a man with your voice?
Yeah, so how about this? How about we get over the lies? So to clarify about that whole incident 6 months ago when you say, oh, but you want to watch CNN instead, I had a scheduled stream a week
Kevin,
in advance, which we do every Saturday
I know
night.
you scheduled
We
it,
do every
but
Saturday
you're a
night.
two-viewer, Andy.
We do every Saturday night. Ghoul Gang
Kevin,
Rising,
Kevin.
and I had Billy Bong as a special guest, and I had
sure
my
you're very
co-host
busy,
Spooky
Kevin.
Newbies.
Kevin, I'm sure you're very busy, but you're a two-viewer, Andy. You are in no position to dictate times and terms.
20,000. You at the time had less than 2,000. So they were about 10 times as big as you are. So even if I was going to be a tiger chasing clout, I'm still going with them. Not to mention, I'm not canceling 2 views
throughout the whole thing. It gave you
700 views, dude. We got like 700 views, dude.
Concurrently?
On that particular episode.
No, concurrently, like live viewers. How much live viewers did you get for that episode?
We had about 80 or something. Why? Like, it's not really that relevant because
you got like, you were having like 2 views. You're lying, dude.
But that's not true. That's not true. You had your gorillas in there. They were some of the viewers. But this is a long-term. But this is a long-term plan, right? This is a 50-year project. It's you don't get famous overnight, right? Like these whole get rich quick, get
America's
big quick.
Probably not going to exist in 50 years. I don't know. Well, you're waiting 50 years to do this. Come on.
Well, not if America takes your advice, sure, but I think on that we might actually have a bit of common ground, which is that I'm arguing for how the West can best promote itself. You're arguing for how the West can how to undermine the West. If I called you anti-Western, you're not even going to take that as an insult. So we're on different sides here.
It depends. So see, like, I'm against Western unipolarity and Western imperialism and neocolonialism, but as far as the Western people are concerned, living in Western countries, I'm not against them. I'm not against Western people. I think the best course of action for Western people is to get away from these foreign interventions and this unipolar and imperialist pretensions, which, as we can see in France and Germany with the civil unrest going on there, and as we can see in America with its own internal political turmoil, imperialism does not benefit Western people. Communists are people-oriented. We don't hate any people. We think we want to do what's best for the people of each country. And for people in Western countries, this American empire has been the bane of their existence. Deindustrialization, the opioid crisis. It's an era on its way out. You can keep coping or you can wake up and smell the coffee.
So multipolarity is not a stable equilibrium. Unipolarity is stable. The question is who's going to be the unipolar hegemon into the future. You have either Russia, China, you got communist China, fascist Russia, liberal America. Those are your 3 choices for all intents and purposes. So.
Okay, let's break that down. So you say unipolarity is stable. Okay, sorry. And then you're saying multipolarity is not stable, something that is coming into being now. Well,
it can both be unstable, but
don't interrupt me, Kevin. I didn't interrupt you, so don't interrupt me. We can play this ugly game. You won't win. So, Kevin, you American unipolarity you claim is stable, which is patently false. It's the source. It's the #1 source of geopolitical instability in the modern world as of now. Now, we don't know what kind of stability a multipolar order is going to have, but what we do know is that neither China nor Russia, whether it's from the perspective of their immediate self-interest, which is what we're talking about, or, you know, I know you're cynical. Most people are cynical. They don't buy it. Is from the perspective of a moral and value and traditional perspective. Whichever way you look from it, they have no ambitions to adopt the mantle of American unipolarity. Actually, Chinese theorists have talked about how American unipolarity is the very source of America's demise. It's a contradiction, an imminent contradiction that has led to the deindustrialization of America and has led to the current political crisis within America. Chinese thinkers are very, very well attuned to that fact, and they do not want to seize the mantle of American unipolarity because they know the ultimate consequence of that would be the destruction of their own country internally. So they focus on an internal developmentalist model, and then on the economic level, win-win agreements between sovereign countries without encroaching on the sovereignty of any country. So it's simple as that.
So you think that it was a win-win when they ruined Sri Lanka's economy or Kenya or any of these countries where they go into? We can
actually talk about the Sri Lankan economy. What actually happened in the case of Sri Lanka is that Sri Lanka got itself into a hole because of the IMF and because of Western loans, and that the Sri Lankan government wanted to enter into a partnership with China concerning one port. And China's role in Sri Lanka's economy was completely minuscule. And yet foreign observers have harped on the case of Sri Lanka just because it's a case in which China has entered into an economic agreement with a country based on a port when that country's economy was in dire states because of its own government. It's not China's fault Sri Lanka has a shitty government. China's not going to impose its own good governance on other countries. So when countries have shitty governments, it's the Chinese will deal with them. It's not their business. They're not going to intervene and instill what they consider a preferable government. And that's true for Kenya. That's true for Africa. So if you think that deals between China and Africa aren't fair for African people, that's the business of those people. They should overthrow their government and renegotiate new terms. There's actually examples of this in history. When the Syriza government got into power in Greece, there was a really shitty deal with China concerning the sale of a Greek port, and the Greek workers were not really getting much out of it. Syriza brought the Chinese officials and negotiated them on new terms in a way that benefited Greece. And the Chinese were very hospitable. They were very generous in giving the Greek government what they wanted. So again, it's not China's fault. It's these corrupt governments' fault. And it's the business of the people to attend to their own country, attend to their own government. It's not China's business.
So China takes advantage of countries that have weak political leadership or big corruption, and they're very interested in buying off their support, like at the United Nations for recognition against Taiwan, for example. Sri Lanka and Kenya are two examples of where they basically got them indentured into these debt contracts where they knew that they wouldn't be able to actually pay it off for infrastructure they didn't really exactly need. And now China basically owns this port, and China's going to own the railway and everything over in Kenya. What it is it amounts to, you like to use the term imperialism, but what China's doing with the Belt and Road is Beijing-centric imperialism. It's infrastructure projects that really only China needs, and it's touted as this win-win. But at the end of the day, the only people that win from it are corrupt politicians that sign the deals with the CCP and the Communist Party in China. You mentioned good governance. They're literally committing a genocide right now in Xinjiang, as well as running a police state that just banned video games, for example, and banned femboys.
Let's rein it in a little bit and go one by one, because this is a lot of claims. So the first thing you're talking about when it comes to China's exploitative and predatory relationship to corrupt and bad governments, this would make sense if it wasn't for the fact that China is continually offering poor countries debt relief. They just gave poor countries $2.1 billion in debt relief. China's been very understanding with these countries and their inability to pay off loans. And I can't see how you could describe that relationship as predatory or China taking advantage whatsoever. I think China has been following the ethics of its Confucian civilization and basically coming to an understanding with other countries that, you know, it's not going to act like a savage barbarian like Anglo-Saxon civilizations have, like Britain, which outright looted and completely took over and colonized countries and treated them like a pirate treats its booty. And in the case of America, which has either behind the scenes orchestrated regime changes, coups, sowed instability and division and turmoil, or has just outright invaded countries in order to impose its own specific political system. I mean, even if we were to accept the maximal extent of your accusations against China in relation to other countries, it's nowhere near the crimes, depravity, and barbarism of Anglo-Saxon so-called civilization. Now, as to the second claim regarding the Uyghur genocide, I'm going to go ahead and say there is no genocide against Uyghurs within China. So if we want to pursue that specific line of argumentation and debate, we can go down that road too. Now, regarding China's recent cultural policies, banning video games and banning kind of K-pop and more promoting masculinity within its country, I think that's absolutely fucking beautiful. I think that's why a lot of people are starting to wake up and realize that China's the most based Chad country on fucking planet Earth. And I wish America was the same way.
So yeah, you basically, the problem here, right? So the problem here is you mentioned that well, the U.S. has done interventions and all this kind of stuff too. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate of that. I'm an interventionist. I'm not going to deny that. It matters what you're intervening on behalf of. So if you're intervening to promote liberalism, democracy, and like basically Western values, that's a good thing. When China goes out in the world, they prop up these regimes that they have no interest in reforming, that are basically puppet states. Like you mentioned, the debt relief. That's another tactic that they use. to bring these countries under their heel and to get them on their side against Taiwan and the free world.
You can't have it both ways. You can't, on the one hand, the only reason I brought up debt relief is because you're accusing China of taking advantage of vulnerable countries. So when China is actually doing the opposite, now you can go ahead and shift the tune to saying that this is a tactic to prop up puppet governments. Now you're saying that China is not reforming these countries' governments. It's not, because China is actually being true to the so-called Western democratic values of the 17th and 18th and 19th century, according to which you don't, it's the people of a country who decide their own fate, not foreigners. Foreigners are not going to decide the fate of a country. That it's the business and belonging of the people living in that country to choose their own destiny and choose their own fate. It's not China's business to choose what government people are going to have. Now, regarding American intervention, I'm actually going to contest the claim that America has ever intervened on behalf of so-called liberalism, freedom, and democracy. It's just patently not true. In each specific case of U.S. intervention, we can locate a web of private interests. And in addition to private interests, general interests of the U.S. foreign policy in maintaining its global economic order. Now, it can cloud that in the phrases of liberty and other ideological mishmash. But the truth is that U.S. intervention, if it was premised on the basis of spreading liberal values and whatnot, there's a whole host of U.S. allies who we would have invaded, who we don't, because we don't actually care about so-called liberalism and democracy. We care about maintaining the post-Bretton Woods system that was initiated in the 1970s, which is the backbone of global order as the U.S. sees it. Now, as a final point, I know this is kind of veering off a little bit. You know, I really actually wouldn't even grant you the claim that you're a neoconservative and that this actually represents what your position is. I think, Kevin, I think you're actually an anarchist. I think you're adopting a position so utterly foreign and removed not only from the time period in which we live, but from the basic sensibilities of almost everyone who lives in this country, America, that it is akin to just get, you know, displaying a middle finger in front of everyone around you. Like, you're basically saying, fuck society. Like, everyone's wrong about the neocons actually being having disastrous policies and leading us to a really bad situation. I'm actually going to be in favor of that. Well, you're really a tiny minority, and it's almost like it's kind of like a rebellion, right? It's really anarchistic. It's just, you may as well be like a anarcho-primitivist. That's how like outlandish your position is in relation to the current reality.
So I like the comparison to anarchy because, like, I'm an advocate. I recommend Hobbes to people. I'm a statist. Anarchists, if you haven't looked, they don't like me. They're not really fans of me. I don't call myself a neocon anymore. I use the term liberal hawk or liberal unilateralist, or you even say like a progressive war hawk. For me, and when I'm interested in at the end of the day, it's like, obviously it's Western hegemony, because like I said, multipolarity is not, it's not stable. It's not a sustainable equilibrium in the long run. You mentioned how, well, we're going to see how it plays out now, but we can look to the past, Haz, and we can actually see how multipolarity played out before. Great example, the run-up to World War I, the world was very multipolar. Power was dispersed amongst a lot of great powers. There was a lot of trade, and it led to a huge war. We can look at World War II. The run-up to that was multipolar.
I think you're confused. So, a few things, right? I don't believe you call yourself anarchist ideologically. You obviously don't identify with that. But I think in practical terms, like when it comes to the practical reality, you are indistinguishable from an anarchist. That was really—
I'm a statist, though.
Now, yeah, but you call yourself— I mean, look, a lot of people call themselves statists who are in actual practical reality anarchists, because it's about the relationship you have to the current state, not the one you have in your head. But anyway, it's not relevant. Now, the second thing, you know, the major problem with what you're saying here regarding multipolarity is that polarity is a very specific concept that doesn't just refer to who's in charge. A global system as such did not exist before American unipolarity. You know, you could call that imperialism. There was many competing and rivaling imperialist powers, but polarity as such, which refers to a great deal more than just who's the big, you know, the big guy in town, didn't even exist in the first place.
Right. So I studied international relations in school. Multipolarity refers to the poles in the system. So we could talk about pre-World War I.
Right.
You had Austria.
There was no system. There was no—
No, but there was a world system. When I say world system, no. When I say world system, Haz, This is important. This is an important definition. I'm not talking about like some ordered structure like the UN or something. I'm talking about the order of the world, not like there's some dude who says you do this.
There was none.
No. But you're missing what I'm saying. So we can talk about the universe. We can talk about the solar system as a system. It doesn't mean that there's police to enforce anything. It's just it's a system.
No. I know what you're trying to say. I know what you're trying to say. It's not a formal. You know, I'm not saying it's just a formal system. I'm saying a world system as such only emerged after the U.S. Period of unipolarity after World War II. Before then, there was no real shared world as we know it. European powers were competing for the mantle of what we would call world hegemony. Now,
yeah, that was a multipolar order. You had no, it was multipolar. It was multipolar.
No, it's an important distinction, right? And we can go to the economic details if you want and why this is. But European powers were competing for the mantle, the one singular mantle of what we can call polarity proper, because polarity is not just how much leverage or power you have in relation to other countries. Polarity actually refers to a specific kind of economic relationship to the world. In what way do you represent a polar orientation, a center around which various countries kind of satellites for? So, for example, in the case of the U.S., the reason we call it unipolarity is because of obviously the Bretton Woods system and the specific system of the recycling of the U.S. dollar and the recycling of American surpluses and profits to develop other countries. This situated America as the single pole of the world. But similar relations and wars between currency and currency politics are now emerging, which is why we call it multipolarity. We don't just call it multipolarity because America's losing, its unilateral power. It's because there are various different economic poles that are emerging in the world, which represent the decentralization of the world system that emerged after World War II. So it's a very important distinction.
So you're basically using like Marxian sort of language here to describe polarity. I'm talking about in international relations.
I didn't use any concept unique or exclusive to Marxism whatsoever. I mean,
you're missing the point, though. We're not really so much talking about economics here. We're talking about the distribution of power in the world. In the run-up to World War I, you can say, oh, well, they were all competing for who's the top dog. There was no top dog yet. It was multipolar. It was dispersed between different capitals.
There was no acknowledgement before in World War I of different poles. There were no poles. There was not even one pole that was established yet. So there couldn't be different poles. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
World War I. By that logic, there couldn't have been rocks before a few thousand years ago because we didn't have a term to define rocks. So therefore, everything in the universe didn't exist until humans gave a definition to it. You can go back and describe a condition as something.
Reel it back a little bit, okay? You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing.
No, but this is a tactic that you'll often do.
You're overcomplicating it. You're overcomplicating it.
This is a tactic that I've seen you do.
Okay, I'm not saying
on numerous times,
Kevin.
Where you'll take something that happened in the past.
Kevin, don't make this difficult. Kevin,
no, and you'll try to deny it. Based on, oh, well, they didn't use the current term for it. The term that I'm using,
Kevin, you're hurting yourself.
Is literally accurate to the state of the world order in the run-up to World War I and World War II. The only one embarrassing themselves here is you, dude.
We're gonna simplify this to save time, Kevin. No one is saying that the reason we should not describe the word polarity to describe the pre-World War II state of the world, not just pre-World War I, is because there wasn't a concept for it back then. I'm saying that polarity refers to an intelligibly different system, an intelligibly different, it's a concept whose object is intelligibly different to the point where we could say, even if we didn't have the word for it back then, it still had not yet emerged. And I kind of explained that in the form of the Bretton Woods system and the relationship between industrial centers of power and hinterlands and so on and so on. Like, for example, now this is the relationship Germany has to Southern Europe, right, within the form of the EU. So that's a pole. You can call it a pole. But regardless, like, I think you just don't understand what is actually being said here. So you talk about rocks in the universe and stuff, really just embarrassing yourself.
No, it's because you're trying to say that we can't qualify the state of the world order and the run up to World War I as multipolar because people at the time didn't call it multipolar.
No.
But it is multipolar. It meets the definition in international relations of multipolarity. Polarity.
Kevin,
in international
I think we need to go back to school.
Distribution of power in which two states.
Did you just listen to what I said or not?
Or multiple states. No, but here's the point, Haas.
I'm telling you, it has nothing to do with it. There's actually
you're just trying to be an economic reductionist. It's about more than economics. It's about power. Because every time you say, "Oh, well, no, that can't be a polar relation,"
you don't have to use the word polarity. Then use a different word. Just say unilateralism or bilateralism, or you can say.
Well, no, that is a state's relation to other states. Yeah, that's not about the world order, though.
You can use decentralized power. You can say there's no one singular power or something. But there's no need to use the word polarity if you don't even know what that concept is referring to.
No, but the irony here is you don't know in international relations what polarity refers to. I'm going to bring up the definition of polarity.
Polarity is tied to world system theory, which is tied to thinkers like Immanuel Wallerstein and others. I'm very familiar with the literature on the subject, Kevin. And
but it doesn't sound like it. But it doesn't sound like it.
Polarity refers to a great deal more than just power, okay? If you don't understand that, I don't think you went to school.
That's ridiculous. You're in law school, and you're in law school, to my understanding, and your reduction of these definitions to try to comply with your specific view is super cringy and wouldn't hold up in court. It wouldn't hold up in court.
Let's look past definitions, because you're not going to agree on what polarity means, because you don't know.
Well, no, I'm literally telling you in international relations, polarity refers to distribution of power in the world system.
Shut up. If we have a Kevin, if we have a semantic difference that we need to overcome, the best course of action is to just agree we're not going to agree about what the meaning of the word polarity is and go to the relevant differently intelligible objects that are under contention. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a identifiable reason why multipolarity would not mean the return to the pre-World War I system. Now, you can say that both are multipolar orders, something I would disagree with, but even if I were to grant you that, it still doesn't make a difference because I'm making the current emerging multipolar order intelligibly different in a way that doesn't allow us to equate it to the pre-World War I order. In that case, multipolarity would be inessential to comparing them because there is something that differentiates them that I am elevating to the status of an essence. Okay, so I know you have a hard time like debating, but you really got to follow the course of argumentation because you waste a lot of time over semantics that don't matter.
So here we go with the whole Anglo box thing again. Definitions don't matter unless Haas is using the definitions, then they matter.
Did you just hear what I said? It's not about whether the definitions matter or not. It's about what is essential as the point of contention in this argument. And just because you want to think that they're the same. Just because you want to think that they are the same because you're calling them the same. I'm not saying they're the exact same. I'm saying they're both ways in which characterized as I've qualified by multipolarity. Kevin, shut up.
You shut up, Haas. I'm literally telling you that they're both.
Kevin, I'm the dominant male. Shut up.
Defined by multipolarity. No, you, Haas. No, you, Haas. What are you going to do? Start chipping out?
Kevin, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Don't fight it. Just accept it. Listen, Kevin. Kevin, listen. I need you to understand something. This has nothing to do with definitions. I'm raising a point that you're not addressing. You're just saying they're the same without addressing the ways in which I've described to you how they're not the same. So can we actually
Well, no, you're just trying to say that the semantics don't matter anymore because you lost on the semantics. I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing.
But you didn't win over the semantics, dude. Have you studied world system theory? Have you studied
the multipolarity? The multipolarity of the pre-World War I era.
You're trying to talk about
the multipolarity.
Kevin, I'm trying to help you.
This coming era.
And you're
what I'm saying is,
okay. All right, go. Haas, say what you're gonna say.
Yeah, all I'm trying to say is that no, I'm not conceding as to your point about the meaning of multipolarity. You're talking out of your fucking ass. You don't know what you're talking about. You sound embarrassing. But if you really want to cling and stubbornly cling to that point, I'm doing you a favor. If we're not going to agree about what the word multipolarity means, we can just address the point of contention under which the word was being used to describe for. Now, I described the emerging multipolar order as qualitatively different than the one before World War I. And I actually backed that up with some kind of content. I actually said why it's different. And I'm elevating that to an essential point of distinction. You're not acknowledging the distinction whatsoever. You're just going back to the contention over the meaning of the word multipolarity. Why do you I think you're dwelling in a semantical difference because you're actually scared to argue over what we're really trying to talk about in the first
Well, no. We can talk about the current order emerging. We can talk about that too. What I was saying before we went into this was that multipolarity is not stable. Now, I wasn't saying that the multipolarity that's emerging now is the same as that which existed before World War I. What I'm saying is it's not a stable equilibrium, and it will give way to a unipolar hegemon. And usually how that happens is a world war. So
I'll break down your logical incoherence so that you could, like, it's all on the table. You could see why you're not very smart. So, Kevin, let me explain it to you like this. You are saying multipolar orders are not stable, and you're using the pre-World War I situation as evidence for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not saying they're the same. I'm just saying that order distribution is not a stable equilibrium.
Kevin, if you haven't noticed, I've understood everything you've said up to this point. I'm just trying to help you right now, right? Because I don't think you understand where I'm at. So I have put forward an argument about why the current emerging multipolar order would not be as unstable. It wouldn't have the essence of the instability of the pre-World War I one. And the reason for that is because in World War I, they were attempting to seize hegemony over the position that America would come to occupy after World War II. Now, I'm trying to say is that America's position is now being decentralized. We're not returning to a Hobbesian jungle in which we're going to fight over it once again. That's beyond us. The mantle of unipolarity held by America will never be held by anyone else ever again. So what I'm actually trying to say is a specific argument in a specific point. There's no need to keep dwelling in semantics when you haven't even addressed the point, which is, how can you argue that the current emerging multipolar order will be just as unstable as the order before World War I, when in fact there are qualitative differences I have pointed out that would probably lead us to believe that it wouldn't have that same instability.
Right. So you point out differences.
To be clear, dude. I'm not arguing that it's impossible that there will be instability in the future because of the emerging multipolar order by any means. But I'm just saying you can't use World War I as evidence, because if it's going to be unstable, it's going to be unstable in a qualitatively different way.
Okay, well, my point was specifically about the instability of it, the reason why it's unstable, and why you can say, well, there are different economic relations now. You can say that power is more decentralized now. Maybe there will be more polls than there were in the run-up to World War I, where they were all concentrated in a similar geographic area. The point for me is that the world system has always been, and for the time being will be, anarchic. And what that means is that there's no real world police. People joke about America being the world police, but like realistically, if China does a genocide, or Russia does some shit, or Russia invades Ukraine, if nobody like the US intervenes, they get away with it. There's not like some world police that just step down and zap them magically. So the reason why it's going to be unstable is that you're still going to have that power vacuum at the international level. And so as much as you can say, well, nobody's going to have that hegemon that America has had, that title, I disagree with that. I would like to see America keep it. But the point is, whether it's China or it's Russia or it's a new power that emerges, or a cluster of powers acting in cohesion, there is going to be a hegemon that emerges, because that's the only real stable equilibrium in the long run, and we'll continue having world wars until we get there. And you mentioned some qualitative differences in terms of the economic relations. You can talk about how, well, the world is more, I guess, more intertwined in terms of trade, except we had a higher percentage of world GDP comprised of trade before World War I.
That's not the argument, though. That's not the argument.
Okay. What's your argument, Haas?
Yeah, the argument is about the specific relationship between developing countries and developed countries, and specifically developing countries, which are no longer colonies that are going to be competed over to be directly plundered and looted and seized, but countries that require and need to take advantage of the differences in the concentration of capital in order to industrialize themselves. Now, in layman's speak, countries need the surpluses of production in the advanced countries in order to develop themselves. Otherwise, they're going to have to engage in their own kinds of, all-encompassing agricultural revolutions, as we saw in the Soviet Union and China, to adopt an independent path to modernity. But we know that this leads to a lot of social, political, and economic turmoil that most countries are not prepared to experience. And also, it also presupposes that they occupy a sufficiently large land mass and a lot of other things. But so, yeah, most countries rely on advanced countries in order to develop. Now, this is really the key to what separates the multipolar order from the order before World War I, is that it's not actually competition over colonies. And you have to understand that that's what was going on. They were competing over the resources and colonies and land space of the world, whether in Europe or beyond Europe. Specifically, they were competing industries requiring different raw materials and resources and so on and so on. So the situation is very different now, right? So instead of a war, you have to understand wars are political. War is an extension of politics and vice versa. It's Clausewitzian, right? Most states, at least formally, despite all neocolonialism, are sovereign countries now, right? So it doesn't make sense that wars are going to be waged for them, as in the case of both two world wars, because both world wars were about either sovereign disputes of sovereignty or lack thereof. So sovereignty is really the key. When you already have the sovereign states that countries like America and China are competing over in terms of the possessing economic relationships to, it's not the same and it's not comparable. Now, you're calling American unipolarity stable. Now, it kind of sounded like you're saying it's not stable, and I agree with you, it's not stable, right? So if it's already not stable, I don't see what the difference is going to be. Well, you're obviously not going to create a global order whatsoever, because a global order presupposes a center of power that's ruling over everyone. So I don't think that's even possible. But what I do think is that countries can pursue, in a way guided by China's example, not by force, not by political coercion or enshrining some kind of political hegemony in the form of military interventions and the threat of being invaded, but can follow China's example, both as a effective model of development for underdeveloped or developing countries, and as a way to conduct foreign relations. Now, believe it or not, cynical people will disagree with this, but for a long time in history, especially when it comes to states like China, foreign relations were not conducted on bond of the pure threat of force and extinction. Foreign relations followed traditions and customs based on mutual respect, that just lines are just not crossed based on some kind of minimal values, Confucian values in the case of China. So a return to this kind of status quo, even if it's a little bit utopian, is, I think, way more realistic and better to aspire to, as opposed to the kind of genocidal extinctionism of your anarchistic kind of LARP that you're putting up.
So the country that you're defending right now is literally conducting a genocide. I want to note for the record here that when we're talking about polarity and when we're talking about unipolarity and American hegemony, the reason why it's dwindling right now is actually it's a self-dwindling. It's the first time in history. The Romans never just gave up their empire by choice. The British didn't do it by choice. But America is doing it.
Anything further, we just have to establish.
So I gotta talk.
There's not an Uyghur genocide.
The reason. No. The reason why America's hegemony is disappearing right now is because of the self-cucking by Washington. It's the first time in history that you've seen now, I don't consider American empire, but you probably would. It's the first time you've seen an empire, so to speak, give up its own mantle. And that's because of these Russian memes and other countries' memes that are perpetrated within the country to make the American people hate themselves and hate their own interests abroad and support giving up power to China and Russia.
I don't know how many layers of
insanity. Central Asia.
Listen, I don't know how many layers of insanity we're on, so I just want to get some things clear. So first of all, China's not conducting a genocide. It's not been proven. There's no evidence for that. The most
that's not true.
The most they accuse it of doing is a cultural genocide, which itself is another thing they made up. Now, the second thing that you said was that The reason why America is in decline is not because it is collapsing under the weight of its own imminent contradictions, which is an argument that is far more coherent, far more defensible, and far more based in reality, but actually because for two reasons. One, they're not listening to Kevin Castley, right? Kevin Castley would really save Washington from the mess that it's in now. Now, the second reason,
and ironically, yes,
and I quote this ad verbatim, Russian memes. Can you please give me an example of these Russian memes that are leading to the demise of the American
so
Empire?
the Internet Research Agency, for example, has run various different Facebook groups promoting the alt-right, promoting the alt-right. So you literally asked for an example. I gave you an example of one of their institutions that's been doing that. It's the Internet Research Agency. I'm asking
for the memes. Can you show us the memes that are leading to the collapse of the American empire? Just like an example.
Yeah. Well, you can see them on Twitter all the time. The idea that America's weak.
Show me one now. Show me one now.
I don't need specific memes. You know what I'm talking about. The disinformation, the disinformation campaign that's been waged by the Kremlin, against Western democracies is the meme warfare that I'm talking about. It is literally the war.
So this is what we need. I'll tell you the information. First of all, I want you to show me one of these memes because I want to seize the memes because they have so much power. They can bring down an empire. Imagine what I could do with them, right?
So you deny the Internet Research Agency running different Facebook groups to pin the far right and the far left against each other in America to weaken American institutions and civil society.
I can address this in two prongs. Remember, I'm a loose.
Well, no. I mean, we're getting off topic right now.
Let's keep going. Don't backtrack.
What's worth noting? What's worth noting here is that throughout all of this, you've proposed this.
We're going to address it. Let's not walk it back. Let's not walk it back.
This utterly economically reductionist
Let's not walk it back.
Of international relations, which is incredibly simplistic, incredibly low IQ.
Let's not walk it back, Kevin. Let's go back to the memes. So two things. The Internet Research Agency, the groups that had found guilty of these, were so minuscule in relevance and significance, it's laughable. If you actually look at these.
But that's not true.
Yeah, they were.
That's not true, though. They literally led to fight in the streets.
Kevin, and the second thing, though, is that even if I were to agree with you that the Internet Research Agency had all these really widespread popular memes and it was really, reaching a lot of people on Facebook, remember that you said that Russian memes are responsible for the decline of the American empire. So
no, I said it was a factor in America giving up its own power in the world because the American people have been brainwashed on a diet of Russia Today and Michael Moore to hate themselves and hate their national interests and give up their position.
Americans love themselves when the deep state engages in foreign interventions.
Wait, we're doing the memes. The deep state. Okay, Alex Jones. Okay, Alex Jones, get out that tinfoil hat, Haas. Get out that tinfoil hat, Haas. My deep state. My deep state. No you. 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 No you.
You understand?
No, you.
Here. You have to understand.
No, you. Kevin. You can't even grasp basic concepts. You want to talk about alpha. Your understanding of international relations is below a beta level. You're like gamma, dude. You're literally gamma at this point, dude. That's your understanding here. No, you. No, you. No, you. No, you. No, you.
Kevin,
no, you.
let me ask you a question.
No, you.
So these memes, so you're saying the American people, they hate themselves when they're trying to address the problem of deindustrialization, joblessness, jobs moving overseas, and the opioid crisis. These are examples of America loving itself, but Americans are hating themselves when they want to give the country back to the people that premise it and that are responsible for it, and that actually
you're missing. You just stumbled on. Yo, Huz, so you just stumbled on one of the big points here, which was the industrial aspect to it. So your whole thing is like, oh, well, China, they have this model of self-development and all this kind of stuff. What you're missing is that the only reason why China isn't everybody making $2 a day right now as agrarian backwater is because of the West. We made communist China as rich as they are. Why? If we didn't do business with them, they would have nothing. They wouldn't even have kiwis, Kevin, as you say, Haas. They wouldn't even have kiwis. So we made them and we can end them. We made them and we can end them.
Kevin Castley, you are so adorable. Let me tell you something. You have to understand the history.
Yeah, recognize. A lot of people think I'm adorable. What up?
To understand the history.
Deal with it.
It's not a compliment.
Kevin, yeah, well, you know what, Haas?
Kevin, shut up, Haas? Because
I'll take it as a compliment, dude.
Shut up.
I'll take it as a compliment, dude.
Shut up. Daddy's talking. Listen.
Daddy's talking, dude. You have the mental comprehension.
I'm trying to refresh your point.
The mental comprehension of an 8-year-old.
Don't cry.
If you're a daddy, what did you do? Have sex when you were like 2 or some shit? You got a 4-year-old or you got a 6-year-old child now? Oh, you're a daddy. You're a daddy. Give me a fucking break, dude. You're a man child. You're literally a man child.
Kevin,
you're one of these goobers who thinks, oh, I'll wear my my workout clothes and I'll sound super tough I'll flex that bicep and that'll prove. What's that gonna prove for shit, dude? What's that gonna prove for shit, dude? We're literally having a debate about international relations. And you're like, oh, let's bring out the guns. Let's bring out the guns.
Let's reel it in.
The empire that you're defending in China, your guns are like from the 1950s, dude.
I just want to talk about industrialization.
My class reductionism, constantly. My economic reductionism. Economic reductionism. Just ignore all other factors of the international order, bro.
Wait, okay. That was fun. Okay. Now let's go back to one at a time. So go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the point I actually wanted to make. So Kevin is making it seem like the U.S. is a communist state in which all of our economic policies are pursued on the basis of a central political interest. But actually, that's not how it works. The reason why companies moved to China and the reason why you had this general trend of industrialization, and it wasn't just China, it was Mexico and other countries, was because it was not only in the interests of the capitalists within America to, because of the cheaper cost of labor, move to these foreign countries. It was the only way to offset the international economic crisis that was started in the 1970s, specifically with the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. And this is what's responsible for the emergence of what we call neoliberalism as we know it. Had China not opened up to the West, it's a dual situation of dependence. There would have been a widespread economic crisis, which the political orders within the West wouldn't have been able to survive. So these Western corporations needed to go move to China because they needed to offset the falling rate of profit that was responsible for the crisis in the 1970s. If you want to the reason I call you an anarchist, Kevin, is because if Washington listened to you, you would literally destroy the American empire and the entire global order as we know it, which is why, Kevin, despite us debating, I wish and pray for nothing more than for Washington to listen to a guy like you, because you will hasten the collapse of the American empire. So, like, if you say, okay, we made China, we can end them, please try to end them. Trump was trying to do it. The Chinese called him Comrade Trump because he strengthened and invigorated the national Chinese industry so effectively by doing
he didn't really try. He didn't blockade China. I would blockade China.
Try as hard as you want, Kev. You are just going to rally the passion of the Chinese people to rise to heights that no people on earth have ever seen before.
Well, they've been rallying against your regime. They've risen up in Hong Kong, they've risen up in Xinjiang, and they've been oppressed and quelled.
No, they didn't.
So your regime is a handful of elite oligarchs.
The only people who rose up in
Beijing
were Al-Qaeda affiliated, Gulf-sponsored terrorists.
Oh, so we're going to need some proof on that. Really? Al-Qaeda affiliated? Al-Qaeda affiliated.
Listen.
Al-Qaeda affiliated.
Hong Kong was a British colony. It doesn't represent the majority of the Chinese people. I don't know why you're using Hong Kong as an example.
It's an example of people rising up for democracy and being shut down by the regime.
You don't understand. You don't even understand what you're talking about. Hong Kong has a different system than China. It's just one country, two systems, right?
That's how it was until recently.
It's not. And listen, you know why Hong Kong is such a bad example for you is that there are Communist Party theorists within China who acutely understand that one of the biggest impetuses of the Hong Kong uprising was also economic dissatisfaction and economic discontent. And one of the reasons for that is because there's no land in Hong Kong. There's no affordable housing in Hong Kong. So people are kind of like packed like sardines in this kind of unlivable way. And one of the reasons for that is because China respects Hong Kong's sovereignty and at least being able to have a different system, there can be no economic reforms like a land reform or any socialistic policies that can allow Hong Kongers to enjoy the same guarantee and basic social safety as mainland China.
They have a higher GDP. They have a higher GDP
no,
per
I know.
capita.
You're not listening to what I'm saying.
You're going to argue Chongqing is better than Hong Kong?
Shut up.
Economically?
I'm not arguing.
Bro, they're richer than the mainland by a lot.
Listen carefully to what I said. I did not say people in the mainland are more wealthy. They're not. They're much poorer. But they have more security in the form of having these guaranteed landed plots that they can always go back to when they lose their job, or they have that kind of safety and security. In Hong Kong, people don't own land. They don't have any kind of guarantee for a minimal dignified life. Now, relatively speaking, people in Hong Kong are obviously much more wealthier. It's much more advanced than most of the mainland. Although that's changing very rapidly, right? The mainland is catching up, obviously. But that's not the point I was trying to say. The point I was trying to say is that the number one source of civil unrest is actually not just poverty. Because remember, poverty is always relative. It's economic turmoil. It's relative economic turmoil and instability. When people no longer have the basic standard of living that they expect they should, that's really the source of a lot of the political discontent. And Hong Kong, because it's not run or governed by a socialist system, isn't able to initiate the necessary economic reforms that are going to disempower the landlords of Hong Kong who own most of the land and own it on the basis of profit. Because of that, there's going to be economic discontent in places like Hong Kong. But that's why you don't see that same level of strife or discontent in the mainland.
Why should people that worked and purchased property, why should they be disempowered? Like, so you're a communist. You're literally anti-land.
Well, yeah, I'm a communist because my position in relation to the relation between politics and the economy is that the government should do whatever supports and benefits the overwhelming majority of the people they govern.
But that's just a cope that you're not a billionaire. That's just a cope that you're not a billionaire. If you were a billionaire, you wouldn't be a communist. You'd be like, listen, yeah, this is my money.
Read my words carefully. Most people are not billionaires. If a government is going to effectively represent the interests of its people, it has to recognize that most people are not billionaires. So, you know,
well, it's not just about being a billionaire. I was talking about landlords. So most of those landlords are not billionaires either. My point is that capitalism gives you the opportunity. Capitalism gives you the opportunity to make something of yourself
land ownership in Hong Kong
in your own way. The communist system in China quells you down if you express anything that diverges from the party line. You talk about this as if it's all about my money and it's all about my land. It's like, no. Ideology is a factor here that I think is worth discussing, because you talked about how the new order emerging. So that's not how this works, Haas. You don't just get to talk the whole time, and then the second I start talking, you constantly interrupt me like a little monkey. I'm talking right now, so you stay in your place. So here's the deal. The ideological differences between the old order, between the old order and the new order that you're talking about emerging has not been taken into account. You're just talking about my economics. My economics are different. My polls are different. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. We live in a world that is divided between islands of freedom and continents of slavery, and your solution is just ignore ideological differences, and therefore we can have peace in the system. That's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit, and that is the most idealist, divorced from reality understanding of power relations. You don't get it. You don't get it. You don't get the role of ideology here. You just simply don't. You think that we can just put ideological differences aside.
You already repeated that a million times. I heard you loud and clear, Kevin. Now I get to respond. So, Kevin, here's the issue here, right? The first thing is that you notice a tendency with you. Whenever we get fixated on a specific line of argumentation, you pivot. You pivot to a billion.
Well, no, that's you. You're the one who pivoted away from the definition of polarity because you lost.
Want to talk about,
and that was your cope. That was your cope, Haas. So have at it, Haas. Have at it, Haas. You can keep pivoting. Break your ankle, bro, with those pivots, bro.
Can you mute this guy?
No, you. No, you.
No, you. Mute this guy.
No, you. No, you.
Mute him.
No, you. Oh, yeah. Big Tanky Haas. Big Tanky Haas. Mute the opposition. No, 100% Stoutness. 100% Tanky.
You should be muted. Shut up.
Right? We got the monkey gang. We got the monkey gang, right?
I focus on meat and potatoes. Kevin pivots and detracts to a trillion other topics. Let's get back to the
you lost on the definition. So you're like,
Shut the fuck up.
semantics. No, you.
Shut the fuck up. 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 Shut the fuck up.
No, you.
Okay, the lady stepping in.
The
lady stepping in.
you,
The lady stepping in. Go ahead, Brittany.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no. Let's just keep going.
Oh, keep going. Okay. Well, basically, what I was pointing out.
Can you mute this guy? He doesn't know how to shut up.
No, you.
Look, I would love to just yell at him and just shout with him, but there's actual content.
We know, Haas. We know,
There's actual meat and potatoes. I want to mute him. Just mute him. There's actual meat and potatoes I want to address here. Like, I actually want to argue about this stuff, right? So that's why I'm trying to bring it back. So you were talking about the situation of land in Hong Kong and that, well, most are not billionaires. I don't know if that's true, but you have to understand that Hong Kong land is overwhelmingly monopolized in the hands of a few. So it's not decentralized in the way you're trying to imply. The second thing is because you had to concede on that point. Now you're trying to say I'm an economic.
I didn't concede. How did I concede? You're literally an anti-capitalist.
Just mute him. Just mute him. What is this? This is nonsense. So the second thing is that you had to concede and then go veer off into this territory about how, well, material reality is not all that matters. Ideological realities matter too. And in China, you can't speak in a way that is against the party line. But that is patently false. People in China have a very far and wide-ranging range of expression, even more than America, actually. Not because they have the right to. What is? How is
that's bullshit?
How is they're able to unmute themselves?
They're a single party.
Shut the fuck up! You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
They're a single party.
Shut the fuck up!
They're a single party.
We're not debating anymore. You want to fucking play this game? You fucking stupid bitch! I've been fucking trying to fucking argue this whole
How much of a child do you have to be to consider China to have a more pluralistic democracy?
I've been actually trying to fucking debate you, and all you can fucking do is interrupt me. Because you're too fucking scared for this debate to actually fucking develop.
That gets under your skin,
People in China can more or less say what they fucking want. That is a fucking fact. You fucking cut me off every fucking point. Want to play this game? I'm the fucking alpha male.
Oh yeah, monkey man, monkey man.
I'm the fucking alpha. Go ahead, take off your shirt. Compare yourself to me.
Me smart, me super smart.
Compare yourself to me,
bro.
Compare yourself to me. Compare yourself to me, Kevin. You are literally the beta of this conversation.
So you are the fucking beta of this
fucking conversation. All you fucking know how to do is interrupt.
I'm not saying you're a clown because a clown gets paid. You are a clown ball. A clown ball is a fraud used by clowns.
You got fucking destroyed, blown the fuck out. So many fucking times. All you know how to do is repeat CNN platitudes.
You're a gamma clown.
Argue for
beta
yourself.
Clowns get paid to use you.
Know how to fucking debate
beta clowns get paid to use you as a prop to entertain children. You're a clown ball, Haas. You're a clown ball, Haas.
You got fucking
You're so insecure about your fucking masculinity. You have to put alpha male in your stupid bio. Yo, fuck you, Haas. Fuck you, Haas. Fuck you, Haas.
I'm your daddy for life.
Oh, you're my daddy, dude. You have an understanding of international relations.
For the rest of your life,
to a 7-year-old child. A 7-year-old child.
You got
this is your monkey man here. Oh, I lost the debate, so I'm gonna compensate dominated anyway. You got absolutely eviscerated. You got nuked, dude. I nuked your ass, dude. I nuked your ass, dude. Hashtag hot gang. Hashtag hot gang.
I'm gonna LARP as a neoconservative. You know I don't have any fucking power to speak of. I don't even have any fucking power, but I'm gonna LARP. I'm gonna LARP as a neoconservative. I have the Bush Dynasty
this power. I have the same power as the Bush dynasty. I'm the new Condoleezza Rice. I'm in power. Oh my God, I have so much power. I'm Kevin Castley. I get 2 viewers on YouTube. I represent superpowers.
Bitching and twitching over here.
This is the Superpower broadcasting. Superpower broadcasting. He is so powerful. He represents power. He represents
This is
power.
what we're supposed to be taking seriously right now.
He represents power. Kevin Castley can't debate, so he wants to just have a yelling match. You want to interrupt me? You don't want to fucking debate, so you just want to have a yelling match. You can have a yelling match, and I'll fucking speak to a yelling match too.
Hey, I'm gonna mute both of you guys really quick.
Who just got nuked epic style? Who just epic?
You got BTFO'd.
No, you got nuked, dude.
BTFO'd.
Dude, you got nuked, dude. I nuked you, dude. I nuked you, Haz. You got nuked, Haz.
You got destroyed. One's in the chat if Kevin got destroyed. One's in the chat if he got destroyed. One's in the chat if he got destroyed.
Absolutely fucking eviscerated.
Look at that. Look at that. Not a single two. Nobody fucking agrees with you, Kevin. You got fucking destroyed.
Clown child behavior on display here from Hazi is evidence of the fact that he knows that his empire has to rip off Russian equipment and rip off of America to try to compete. You'd be nothing without American investment. You'd be nothing without Western investment in China. We made you, and we can destroy you. Tonight, you just got nuked.
You got blown the fuck out. 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 Beta males know their place. 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 Beta males know their place.
Evidence.
Beta males know their place. Beta males know their place. Beta males know their place. Shut the fuck up! You didn't even want to debate. All you could do is fucking interrupt me, and now you want to talk about a civil conversation? You're the fucking one who started this, Kevin. I wanted to fucking talk about the substantive content we were debating about, and you just kept fucking interrupted me. You kept fucking doing this, Kevin, because you know that when it comes to a rational debate, you will get fucking destroyed. But even in an irrational debate, I fucking destroy you.
Look at this monkey man. Look at the monkey man
you
right now.
You got destroyed. I'm your alpha male. I'm your daddy for life. I'm your daddy for life. I'm your fucking daddy for life, Kevin. You will never recover from this. You will never fucking recover from this. You will never recover from this L. You will never recover from this L. You will never fucking recover from this fucking L.
Actually in the presence
never recover
of a war
from this L.
who's willing to go and actually do what it takes
from this fucking L. You will never fucking recover from this L. You will never fucking recover from this L.
Handle somebody
you will
like
never
me
fucking recover from this L.
100% hawk,
you will never
100% pro-West,
moderators,
100%
can you not?
liberal,
Can you just remove him?
100% progressive.
Can you remove him?
You can't
I've been obliging you guys and listening to your fucking rules.
All right, gentlemen.
Can you remove him? I'm willing to follow the rules, and he's not. I follow the rules and you won't. Just remove him. Just remove him. Remove him and then bring him back. Remove him and then bring him back. Just remove him and bring him back. Okay, good.
There you go.
All right.
Now let's get it back on the rails.
We're gonna calm down.
We're gonna rein this back. So to be clear, that's an ugly side of me. But as everyone can see, I'm trying to debate, and when I'm trying to get my points in, he can't help but butt in and interrupt me. So he wants to have a yelling match, and we can do that. But I actually want him to know he's being dominated intellectually. You see, he's going, oh, look how ridiculous Haz is. Well, then what do you want me to do? Debate? I tried that, and all you do is fucking interrupt me mid-sentence, not even allowing me to fucking clarify what I'm trying to say. So the second thing I was trying to say was that America might have free speech, but Chinese netizens, and this is true for anyone with experience in this, is that Chinese netizens are more informed. They're more knowledgeable. They don't speak mindlessly. They speak according to having education, according to being informed on topics. They have in-depth discussions about a range of history and topics with such depth and complexity, it fucking pales in comparison to the kind of online discourse you see in America. But as far as actual censorship in China, it's actually so simple and so fucking on the surface that it does not get in the way of the Chinese people's ability to voice their actual authentic expression and their authentic actual views. They may be censored and may not allowed to promote civil unrest and social chaos, but if you actually survey the Chinese people, the overwhelming majority of them are glad that China's not rife with social chaos and anarchy like countries like America or Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union after the collapse of communism. Chinese people are very well aware that the order that prevails within China needs to and should be maintained. And I have not seen any evidence of anyone even try to argue to the contrary.
Okay,
now,
I'm gonna bring him back on.
Yeah.
Kevin, we're gonna try to go back to some normal debating now. That you guys got that out of your system, and let's go back to debating like normal.
So that's what happens because Haas isn't used to actually arguing with a Western war hawk who isn't just a cuck, liberal, neoliberal internationalist who basically just wants to surrender various holdings in the world, various forward positions. He's not used to it. Not used to it. That's what happens. So not used to seeing somebody who's actually proud to be Western come out here. So no, my point was that this all started because Haas tried to say that China had more of a representative expression from the people than America. That's the biggest bullshit that anybody's ever heard. Like, he doesn't even believe that. There's no way he believes that. He calls himself a tanky. What do you think a tanky is? It's somebody who sends in the tanks to quell democratic uprising. He doesn't even believe that. So,
well, now you want to debate about the events of Hungary '56, but we can actually talk about what the word tanky means. We can talk about the word. Hey, you want to keep interrupting me because Tuka played this game, and I can
Two can play at this game, and I nuked you, dude.
No, you got fucking destroyed.
No, you got nuked. You got absolutely nuked, dude. You got absolutely nuked. You got absolutely nuked, Todd.
You can't even follow the fucking rules of the fucking platform you're on.
Okay, absolutely.
Host. I let this guy talk. I'm letting him talk, and now I'm talking, and he interrupts me. So how does that work?
Okay, so I mean, and also if I'm gonna hit the mute button, please don't unmute yourself so I can at least just freaking get it to like just simmer down a bit. So God, I hate that people figured out they can do that.
Yeah, you StreamYard all the time. Yeah, it's a nuisance. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, just like let's let people finish talking. You guys got the content out of that, so let's go back to the debate now.
So basically, yes, I do believe that. Actually, I do believe that in China, people's authentic views and opinions are able to give way better and more representative expression than in countries like America, where people didn't even fucking know what they want. They're not even informed to be in tune with their actual interests as a people. That's why America gets into fucking online debates over frivolous bullshit that's in nowhere near their actual authentic feelings and interests. They just get caught up in culture wars that are just existing for their own sake. It's not even because it's what they really believe anymore. People just take sides because it's like a sports team at this point between the Democrats and Republicans. So yeah, in China, when they don't have all of that useless fucking bickering, they can actually get to the business of actually expressing what they authentically view the world and what they authentically want from the state. And the state is very attentive to what Chinese people say, to their protests and their various objections and suggestions. And they integrate all those things in their 5-year plans, among other policies. So yes, China's a far more robustly democratic country than America. It's a far more democratic country in terms of actually representing what the majority of people actually think and believe.
So you mentioned the culture war. You think, oh, it's frivolous or whatever. I actually agree to some extent there. And I've done videos in the past saying how the culture war is unwinnable for conservatives. It's pointless. It's just a massive, endless cope where every time we gain ground, they're like, ooh, well, we're going to try to undo this or try to undo that to get a little bit ground back. Or maybe we'll get one person on the Supreme Court to overturn stuff for a few years. And then the liberals keep winning and winning and winning. In 50 years, it's going to be the most conservatives in America are going to be pro-trans rights, for example. So it's a lost cause for conservatives. So I actually agree that the culture war shouldn't matter. The conservatives should just give up. They're never going to win. But China, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily have that because you're not allowed to be liberal over there. Like if you advocate for what I want, I'm a moral universalist, liberal universalist, I would get imprisoned for advocating for gay rights, trans rights, women's rights in China, for example. They would consider me a dissident, even if I didn't even talk about the party per se, even if I wasn't just advocating for democracy, just advocating for Uyghur rights, for example, immediately going to jail. And so Haas is going to try to gaslight you here and try to say how China is a better representation of expression because there's no culture war. The reason why there's no real culture war is that the Communist Party jails anybody that's not a conservative communist. So,
yeah. So there's three prongs about why that's a stupid argument. The first one lies in the fact that if China jails all LGBT activists, it's really weird how you can actually look and see that within China, there are LGBT organizations and advocacy groups and activists that are not in jail. So it's a patent lie that China is just going to jail anyone who advocates for the rights of sexual minorities. The reason why it's not really widespread within China is because, and this is true, the majority of Chinese people are just not interested in this topic. They're just not. They're not enthralled by it in the way America is. And the reason why Americans are enthralled by it is because it's been overly politicized by the Democrats and the Republicans. The second thing regarding Uyghur rights, well, that's extremely ambiguous. I mean, Uyghur rights can fall under the umbrella of Al-Qaeda, right? That Uyghurs should have the right to have an Islamic state that is completely separate from China, violating the one China policy. So what is that? What exactly is meant by Uyghur rights would determine whether or not you would be imprisoned or whether you would face repercussions. The third thing is that shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
You asked the question.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I didn't finish my fucking point. Shut the fuck up. You asked the question, I answered. Kevin, shut the fuck up.
No, you, Haas. No, you,
Shut the fuck up.
No, you, Haas.
Shut the fuck up. Kevin, shut. Is anyone moderating this? Like, I don't interrupt him, and he interrupts me.
Except you do.
Because he's an anarchist. He's an anarchist, and he can't follow
anarchist status,
yeah,
right?
Because you can't follow fucking rules. Just follow the rules of the fucking platform you're on.
You, Haas. You're the one shipping out.
All right. Just let him finish before it gets riled up again. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah. So the third thing, what you're saying is that, oh, in China, the reason there's no culture war is because the government just censors it. If the Chinese people were actually authentically and organically inclined to have culture wars, maybe at first it would be censored. And this is how all these trends work in China. But eventually the government would have to assent to what the overwhelming majority of people want. So no, and that's just assuming we even buy into this idea that culture wars in general are being censored in China. The truth is that the Chinese people do not give a fuck about the things that seem to interest Americans online. Chinese people spend their time online talking about history and civilizations and religions and important things like that. Americans spend their time online arguing over bathrooms. So that's really the difference. The Chinese people just are not interested. They just don't care.
Well, that's such an essentialist and overgeneralization. There are people in America that have arguments about philosophy online, and there are people in China that have arguments about who killed better in Fortnite after they use their VPN and everything. So the idea that China, that netizens or whatever over there are more intellectual than people in America online, that's not really true. The reason why you don't really see a culture war unfolding is that liberal voices are literally oppressed in China, whereas in America, liberals are winning and conservatives are angry and furious and coping and fuming and dooming because they see women being empowered. They see LGBT people having rights. They see blacks having equal rights, for example. And they look at that and they see their old way where they were on top, and they see that as basically vanishing from them, and they're pissed about it. Now, I agree that the culture war shouldn't really be that much of a thing in America. We should just have a socially liberal society in which you're free to live your truth. They don't have that in China. Haas's explanation is that the Chinese people don't care about it. Well, that's easy enough to say if you're a straight, conforming person who follows the party in China. If you're anybody who deviates from that, that's not true, though. And you mentioned, oh, what are Uyghur rights? What are Uyghur rights? The rights not to be forced sterilized, the rights not to have your children taken away from you, the rights not to be sent to a detention center to be brainwashed and tortured. And if it so happens, and I've said this before, if it so happens that there are cases, and there have been in the past cases of terrorism against China, I support terrorism against Chinese military and police forces. I don't support it against Chinese civilians, but if that's what it takes to achieve liberation, I support their liberation. Just as I support Kurdish liberation, they are the good guys here. The regime is the bad guys. The behavior of the regime is not going to change. The regime has to be changed. So, and I support working with anybody to accomplish that, even if we've got other disagreements. They're an ally here against China. So,
before we address everything, I just want to say I am so fascinated at how neoconservatives finally came around to embracing their true allies, Al-Qaeda. So that's a really
Al-Qaeda. There's no Al-Qaeda.
Shut up. Shut up. Shut
no
up.
Al-Qaeda.
I let you say a bunch of dumb shit. Shut the fuck up. Shut the. No one cares. Shut up. So shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I'm nowhere near done. We're just getting started with all this dumb shit you just said. So you're actually made the claim that we cannot say that Chinese people are more informed because there are exceptions within America and there are exceptions within China. But we're not talking about exceptions. We're talking about the overall trend. The overall trend is that Chinese netizens are far more careful, far more thoughtful, and far more intellectual and educated. And, you know, they actually talk about interesting things that matter overwhelmingly, right, as compared to America. So you actually haven't addressed that this is an overall trend, be there that there may be exceptions within both countries. Now, you're saying that liberals are repressed within China. That's interesting because liberals in China are literally given pretty high-ranking posts in academia and media and culture. And much of the discontent against liberalism that's now starting to form the Xi Jinping era, and this is true if you know Chinese people, you'd understand this, it's coming from below, not even from up top. Chinese people are becoming more fervently patriotic and loyal to not only their country, but to their party and its history than ever before in history. It's comparable almost to the Cultural Revolution. The Chinese people themselves are putting grassroots pressure on the Western-inspired institutions that emerged after the reform and opening up to get rid of and sack and purge and actually struggle against these liberal Western elements that they don't want in their country. Now, as far as individual expression culture wars are concerned, China is not completely culturally hegemonic, but it does represent a shared civilization that's thousands of years old. And there are exceptions within China of individuals who break the mold and go their own way and go their own path. The whole point is that this is never going to be a general trend because China was never an individualistic society. It's not because people are not allowed to do those things. They are. I mean, there's examples of Vice documentaries going to look at subcultures in Shanghai and other big cities. These things exist. It's just not going to represent the major trend within China because, believe it or not, the character of China reflects the character of the Chinese people in the last and final instance. The whole People's Republic and Communist Party is founded on the basis of acknowledging that very premise.
So,
and finally, one last thing. Regarding this thing about what would it take to satisfy Uyghur rights, the right not to be kidnapped, the right not to be sterilized, well, then it's even better because there's not even any need for any activists for Uyghur rights because none of those things are being violated in the first place.
So, okay. So we'll start off with what Haas mentioned first, which was the idea that, well, are there some people in China that would have these things like LGBT rights and other stuff as an issue? Yeah. But is it the majority? No. Well, the thing about rights is that they exist to protect those that are directly affected, right? So, for example, the right to not be arrested in the middle of the night without a warrant, that's a thing that you should care about and defend, even if you're not the one that the police are coming to tonight to arrest. Likewise with LGBT rights, just because you're not gay doesn't mean that you shouldn't support them. This is about liberalism. This is about the Enlightenment. This is about the idea of humanism, the idea that all people have dignity and should have equal protection under the law, something that doesn't exist in communist China. Haas mentioned that, well, the Chinese people are more patriotic now and everything. They're more brainwashed in large to support the party. That's true. Now, a lot of people don't buy the party's propaganda, but hundreds of millions of people do. You could say the same thing about North Korea. That doesn't mean that they're not an enemy. That doesn't mean that the regime is not to be removed from power and the people liberated. You can liberate people who would be better off liberated, even if they say right now that they're against that. Obviously, I mean, they literally live with a gun to their head, and even if they of their own volition say that they support the regime, if they were to see the alternative with their own eyes, with free access to information, they would obviously choose the West. The West offers the highest standard of living, the highest dignification of humanity, and the best rights for everybody. And additionally, to get to the final point about the Uyghur genocide, so we have satellite photos documenting this. We have interviews of those who have been in the camps or have family that are in the camps. We have video footage showing the camps. I don't see how we can deny that 2 million people have been detained against their will. That's just not something that you can cover up in this era. Hitler had a hard time covering up the Holocaust, and we have access to satellites now. So how can you deny this? How can you say that there's no proof of this? Yet you throw around accusations that they're working with Al-Qaeda, which you obviously have no proof for. So, and again, I've also said if they did terrorism against the party, they're justified to do it. They're defending themselves. So.
Oh boy. Okay, you done, Kevin?
Right now, yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, first of all, the point is that I just mentioned that those individual exceptions are not being persecuted within China. So that was the whole point. But it's interesting that you develop this contradiction. On the one hand, you want absolute rights, unconditional rights to protect minorities, right? The Western contrived view of rights, it actually doesn't come from Renaissance humanism. It comes from Anglo-Saxon metaphysics in the 17th century. But that's regardless.
Who cares where it came from?
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. I'm going to start interrupting you in your turns too.
Okay.
We're going to see how you like it. But anyway,
cool. Been doing it all night.
Yeah. So no, I haven't. I let you talk. That whole fucking diatribe you just did, I let you talk. So second of all, China doesn't focus on abstract unconditional rights because in actual material reality, no rights are unconditional. China focuses more on the content of rights. Westerners claim that they want the right to freedom and liberty, things that have no substantive content, things that have no determinate being, to the right to be what, the right to do what. China is a country that is attuned to what its people are and to who it is. So it doesn't need to create abstractly negatively contrived, abstract formal rights that are applied in every circumstance and situation, because China is a living and it's a country ruled by a living people and not a dead doctrine, not a dead letter. So it's really important we understand what we're talking about. Just because there are no absolute rights within China doesn't mean the government acts arbitrarily. It acts according to the determinate content and determinate being of the Chinese people themselves, conceived not as a sum total of individual atoms, but as a real civilizational and collective being. Now, you mentioned regarding this business of the Uyghur genocide, so-called Uyghur genocide, that you have satellite photos and so on. But if you actually evaluate the content of those satellite photos, they don't prove the existence of any of the claims made by those claiming the Uyghurs are being subject to a genocide. You have the establishment of schools and institutions and buildings and centers and factories, things that are completely removed from the subject whatsoever have been, by satellite photos, been accused of being, you know, concentration camps. And there's many cases of this. There's many inconsistencies and plot holes in all of the various claims being made that so-called justify the claim of an Uyghur genocide. Finally, the idea that you're saying there's no connection between the ETIM separatists and Al-Qaeda, that there's no proof of this connection, is just about the most laughably stupid and uninformed fucking thing I've heard in like a month. I mean, even American State Department would have to admit that, yes, there does exist a connection between the two, which is why the ETIM used to be listed as a designated terrorist organization, not just by China, but by the United States of America because of its affiliations and ties to Al-Qaeda. So I really can't believe how you could say such an uninformed and ignorant thing when it's like self-evident to everyone that, yes, Al-Qaeda has been working in Xinjiang, that there are connections between Uyghur separatists and Al-Qaeda. I mean, it's like no one has ever denied that except you, to the extent of my knowledge.
You had claimed basically that the Uyghurs are working with Al-Qaeda. It's like, okay, there's tiny...
To be clear, I didn't say the Uyghurs are working with Al-Qaeda. I said a tiny minority of Uyghur separatists who do not represent the majority of Uyghurs were working with Al-Qaeda, and that's a fact.
Okay, well, on that point, they're justified in doing so. And in that particular case of Uyghurs versus the CCP, Al-Qaeda's on the good side. So, okay. They're on the bad side against America.
I did, Kevin, was point out the irony of a person calling themselves a neocon, worshiping.
I don't call myself a neocon.
Okay, whatever. You worship and you hold as a model of the Bush era of interventionalist unilateral politics. Well, guess what? I mean, like the Bush era was defined by the war on terror, and Osama bin Laden was the primary villain of the Bush era. So it's just really funny that that you're trying to like rep that, and at the same time it's coming full circle, and it turns out like you're best friends with Osama bin Laden.
No.
Best friends with
That's
Al-Qaeda
bullshit.
now, you know?
I can recognize. I can recognize
I grew up during the war on terror.
The consequence.
Yeah.
The consequence of what Al-Qaeda does against the CCP is a net good, but what they do in Afghanistan and what they do elsewhere is a net bad.
I get that you support them against the CCP.
No, against
you
the
have to understand, anyone who grew up during the war on terror, like me, and who's like familiar with what defined the Bush era, to see a self-proclaimed liberal hawk, as if you're calling yourself now. I know all the anarchists have special snowflake terms. To see someone like that identify with, say that they support Al-Qaeda is just fucking hilarious. If that's not ironic to you, then
the CCP. I don't know what to tell you. I don't support Al-Qaeda against the West. I support Uyghurs doing whatever they can to free themselves of their oppression. If I was oppressed
let me ask you a question.
If I was oppressed in East Turkestan, basically in that region, you look at the detainees by the millions, and you deny. You deny this mass detention. Yet it is a thing. It is documented. There are interviews, and we have satellites. You took issue with the satellites, except satellites don't prove anything on their own, but augmenting other evidence, they can paint a picture of what's unfolding on the ground.
There's absolutely no evidence.
But that's not true, Haas.
Yeah, there is.
You don't even believe that.
And
here's
Kevin,
the thing.
I know you support.
Here's the thing.
So Kevin, you support.
If I lived there, if I lived there and this was being done to me and my people, you can bet you I'd be working with. I would work with the Russians if they offered help.
So let me ask you a question. Would you do it if you were living in Gaza?
If I was in Gaza, what do you mean?
Like if you were living under the conditions in Gaza, would you also do the same thing you're saying now?
Yeah, I would work. I would support Israel. I would work with Israel to try to get rid of them all.
No. You would have to support the Palestinian terrorists, as you would call them, right?
No, because Israel is the liberator. I care about the relationship between the liberator and the oppressor.
You support national liberation so much. Israel's the liberator. That's why they're building settlements in the West Bank.
That's why they're building settlements in the West Bank.
So guys,
between the liberator
these are the
and the
people
oppressor.
Who talk about
Gaza is oppressed by Hamas, not by Israel.
The West Bank? What about the West Bank?
Not by Israel.
So wait, the West Bank is Hamas building settlements in the West Bank and kicking people out of their homes?
Not Hamas. The West Bank is oppressed by the Palestinian Authority.
So who's building settlements and kicking people out of their homes? Is it the Palestinian
I support
Authority?
A one-state solution. Like everybody would be better off under Israel. Like,
I'm not asking. Okay, then everyone would be better under China. Everyone would be better under China.
That's not true. Communism is depraved and evil.
Because you have a double standard. So anyway, we know you don't.
No, it's not a double standard.
We know you don't. Listen, Kevin.
It's not.
You don't care about. You don't care about national liberation.
It's not.
You don't care about national liberation. Don't come at me with this business. Oh, if I was living in Xinjiang, I would do anything by any means necessary. But if you were living in Palestine or Gaza, the tune changes suddenly, right?
But it's not a double standard.
The fucking hypocrisy is incredible. You don't give a shit.
It's not a double standard.
You don't give a shit about people being oppressed. You just want. You're just against China because Anglo-Saxon so-called civilization is on the decline. You just hate China. You don't care about Muslims. You don't care about oppressed peoples.
This is bullshit.
No, that's not bullshit. It's not fucking bullshit, Kevin.
It's not a double standard to support liberalism everywhere. It's not a double standard to support liberalism everywhere.
What is so liberal about Israel's actions in Palestine? Nothing.
Wait, are you kidding me?
Liberalism is unsustainable.
My criticism of Israel
is collapsing.
My criticism of Israel is that they haven't done enough They're not actually hawkish enough on fighting the PA and Hamas.
Yeah, you're an anarchist. We get it.
No.
So here's the thing.
Against Netanyahu for sure. Netanyahu was against liberating
you
them.
Want chaos. I get it. You want chaos. You're an extremist
I want
anarchist.
order. I want a world liberal order. I actually want the opposite of chaos.
No one cares.
You're the one who wants chaos. You're the one who wants a multipolar order, which is
one cares what you. No, I don't have to want the multipolar order. One is emerging objectively. I'm just acknowledging.
Well, yeah, and I'm here to try to argue for America to preserve its hegemony. Preserve its hegemony.
Keep trying. Are you doing a good job in this debate?
You gonna keep on chipping out?
Are you doing what he's gonna say?
You keep chipping out.
Kevin, say whatever he's gonna say. Say it quick.
Yeah. No, I was just saying it's not a double standard to support the West in both cases. It's not. So I'm against Hamas, and Hamas is the one oppressing the Palestinian people. And just as it's the case in East Turkestan or Xinjiang, it's the CCP that's oppressing the Uyghur people, and it's the West and allied forces that are trying to liberate them. It's not a double standard to support one group that does bad things here but does good things elsewhere. You can support a group in one case and be against them in another case. That's not a contradiction.
No, it's so hilarious about this double standard.
I'm anti-Al-Qaeda. I'm anti-Al-Qaeda, but I don't blame Uyghurs for doing what they can because the West simply hasn't offered enough support to them.
What's hilarious?
And why is that?
Yeah,
because we're cucked by a bunch of neoliberal corporates.
Is that in contrast to the situation?
By a bunch of neoliberal corporates that want that cheap Chinese labor. Because we're cucked by a bunch of neoliberals that want that cheap Chinese labor. Oh, chicken hawk. Yeah, well, why don't you living in China? I'm a chicken hawk. You live in America. Why don't you live?
I'm trying to win this country.
Why don't you?
I want to win this country. I want to build the Communist Party in this country. But anyway,
so you're a fifth column. You're a traitor. Okay, that's why you live in America. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm not breaking any laws, so good luck. So anyway, Kevin.
Not yet. Yeah, so we'll see what happens.
Anyway, Kevin, you live in Canada. You're not even a fucking American. Shut the fuck up. Anyway,
the liberal world transcends America or Canada.
You talk so much about America, you don't even fucking live here.
Canada would be a Soviet gulag colony without America. So I believe in the.
And maybe
when I talk about the liberal order, I'm not just talking about America.
You're not even American. You're not even American.
We're debating the West.
You are not an American. You have the Empire State Building.
Do you deny that Canada is part of the West? Do you deny that Canada is part of the West?
A weeaboo, but
we're debating about the West versus China, not America versus China. We're debating about the West.
You told me to leave my country.
China.
You told me to leave my country, then you should leave Canada.
We're debating about the West versus China. Do you deny that Canada is a part of the Western Hemisphere? Are you that stupid? We're talking about the West.
Kevin, the West is not a country.
We're talking about the West. Canada is a part of the West.
The West is not a country.
We both live in the West.
The West is not a country. Anyway, what's so hilarious
Wait, when did I argue it was a country? We're talking about the West versus China.
Because you told me to move out of my country.
It's literally the title of the debate, the West versus China. You're trying to discount my opinions. You're trying to discount my opinions because I live in the West, but I support the West? How does that make any sense? I support Western interests and I live in the West. That's consistent. You support Chinese interests and you live in the West. That's not consistent. That's not consistent. Go and live in China, dude. Go and live in China if you love it so much.
What's hilarious about the double standard about Palestine and Xinjiang?
Because the West is for progressives. The West is for liberals.
Have it way worse off than Uyghurs. Xinjiang has always been part of China.
You can go and live in Xinjiang. Is a wonderful land.
Whereas Israel came to being in 1948, and it's a completely different situation. Uyghurs are not having their homes evicted. They're not being fucking placed in an open-air prison like Gaza. You talk about concentration camps. Gaza's the biggest fucking concentration camp on earth. It's not even fucking comparable.
Move there. You think it's such a wonderful land. Go move there. You think it's so wonderful.
I just BTF you about Palestine.
You got nukes, dude. You got nukes. You're an absolute phone child.
You got BTF
You got nuked. You got vaporized, dude.
I BTF
100 million degrees, dude. You got thermal nuke.
Your volume or something is really quiet.
Yeah, well, you know.
It's like actually really hard. Can you guys hear him? I can't hear him really. No, Todd. It's like his volume's like really quiet. maybe I don't know if it's your mic setting or something, but we're gonna get to the Q&A, you guys, and as you said, you had to be somewhere at a certain time too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we just jump right into the Q&A? Because yeah. All right, let's see here. From CG said, thanks, Todd and Brittany. It's great that a Canadian neocon and an Arab communist think they know what is best for China and America. Peak content. Okay.
No, I don't.
I'm not a neocon.
I'm an American, so I'm allowed to talk about America.
You're an American that roots for the enemy. You're literally a fifth column in
not
your
the
own
enemy
country.
of the American
I'm
people.
A Westerner that roots for the West.
You're an enemy of the American people.
West.
Yeah, you root for the enemies of the American people. I root for the allies of the American people.
You're a communist.
Yeah.
You're an unironic tanky.
Communists are here for the people.
You've described yourself as a Stalinist. Stalin wanted to nuke America. So
Stop to defend it. No, he didn't, and that's only to defend himself against the preemptive strike, Operation Unthinkable, which the Allies were planning against the Soviet Union.
Which should have happened. No,
yeah,
but you look
exactly. So shut the fuck up. You don't represent.
You look into the doctor's clause.
Communists represent love for the people. 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 That's the facts.
Super hot tonight, right?
That's the
fact. We're getting X-rated.
Dominated, Kevin. You're getting dominated. You're getting dominated. No one can even hear you, Kevin. Kevin, you're getting dominated. No one can even hear you. No one can even hear you, Kevin. What a beta male. What a beta male. What an absolute beta male. No one can even hear him. No one can hear him. Complete beta male.
Complete beta trolling the mic is going to get their channel suspended.
Yeah, okay. No, it's not. Having a loud mic is fine.
You're not allowed porn on Twitch, dude.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Sure, Kevin.
Daniel, what happens to Tajikistan? I don't know if I said that right. If they default on the loans issued to them by China, which they probably will.
Yeah, there's a precedent of countries defaulting on loans or just telling China they can't pay back the loans, and China works with them. China has never threatened them militarily or done anything coercive in relationship to that. So there's precedents of countries defaulting on loans or just telling China they cannot pay back these loans. So there's already precedent for that. So it's probably going to be the same as those other countries.
And so they become a de facto Chinese colony.
Like no, they don't, because a colony actually is when a country owns your territory and has executive control.
Neo-colonialism. So.
Okay, you're talking about, you say you defend the West when the West is the only premier neo-colonial power on earth. It's like France has France's relation. Okay, so how would you describe France's relationship to West Africa?
I don't support it. Okay, well, I don't actually consider France to be much of an ally. I just want to be clear.
Well, it's part of the West.
Well, okay. They're internally sure, but outwardly they often.
So apparently, I thought you were talking about the West. I thought you were talking about the West.
Dude,
France is part of the West.
Dude, fuck France. Yeah, they're as much a part of the West as Pakistan.
No, they're not. Okay, so they're just as much part of the West as Canada. So I don't know what you're talking about.
True. That's bullshit.
Because you're not talking about the West. You're talking about Anglo-Saxon countries. You're not talking about the West. You're talking about Anglo-Saxon
in Africa. When Canada intervened in Africa, it was for humanitarian interests.
Yeah, sure it was.
I'm not defending French colonialism. I'm not.
Gotcha. This is an example of beta males knowing their place. Beta males have to know their place.
French colonialism. France is different.
You know,
France is bullshit. So
yeah.
From Stalinist the Minis, how can Kevin justify supporting Al Qaeda? How can you say you're pro-West and support the people who did 9/11 and have killed many Western people?
Yeah. So about that. I'm specific here. It's not a contradiction. It's kind of like saying, how can you support the Soviets against Hitler, but you're also against the Soviets? It's like, well, we have bigger enemies to fry right now. Communist China is aiming nukes in America. Al Qaeda's not. Al Qaeda is an enemy in Pakistan. Al Qaeda is an enemy against the U.S. and Canada. Al Qaeda is an enemy in Afghanistan.
He talks about the threat of nukes, and he just said he supported Operation Unthinkable, which is going to be a war of genocidal extermination against the Soviet Union. This guy said he's scared of CCP nukes, and he literally said he supported Operation Unthinkable. What a complete hypocrite!
Look at how much of a hypocrite. You have to deep throat the mic because he can't handle a serious response.
No, you got BTF.
Dude, Like, at what point are you going to just sign a contract and become a porn star? Because it seems like you just enjoy deep-throating objects so much, dude.
Because you need to be dominated, Kevin. Kevin, you only know the language of force. You can't be rationally negotiated with. You don't speak rationally.
You can probably
not have a rational argument. So the only thing that works in your case is utter dominance.
Go for it, Haas.
Just like Operation Unthinkable, which you supported.
Mike does sound something.
Yeah, I did support Operation Unthinkable. And
right. So don't talk about the threat of China just defending itself with nukes when you're the aggressor here.
No. I'm an anti-communist.
Yeah, you're the aggressor.
No. I can be against China having nukes, but for America.
How dare China defend itself?
Double standard.
China's pointing nukes at us. Making it seem like China wants to do a preemptive strike and they don't want any such thing.
I'm a liberal. I'm not a communist. I'm not a relativist. I'm a liberal universalist.
Nazis.
I want liberal countries.
Ad hoc aggression.
Liberal countries to be empowered. And I want authoritarian regimes to be removed from power.
Yeah, complete ad hoc aggression against other countries.
When are you actually going to try listening for once?
Well, you're telling me that the guy who kept interrupting me nonstop,
dude? Because right now you're operating on
the guy who can't help but interrupt me nonstop wants to talk about when I'm going to listen.
So,
all right. So, I don't know who this is, but they're writing some weird stuff to you. Do you know who this is, Kevin?
This right here. That is an account. That is an account that has spammed my phone number, doxed my phone number, spammed my phone number with harassment on numerous occasions.
No one cares.
As well as doxed.
No one cares. No one cares.
And now
no one cares about your drama.
Shut the fuck up. Somebody mute Haas. This doesn't actually concern him. That wasn't addressed to Haas. Somebody.
What about when you were interrupting me? You don't like when you play at that game?
Mute Haas. Mute Haas.
Okay, I'll listen to Brittany.
Yeah. So I love the projection. This guy's accusing me of doing doxing. We don't do doxing in my community. This guy has no evidence. We don't do doxing. This guy and some of his friends that have spammed frivolous copyright claims against my channel are a bunch of these stupid reactionary neocon loser hawks that are pissed that there's a liberal hawk that's actually out here representing interventionism while they sit in their basement and jerk it to hentai because they have no lives and they eat mom's Hot Pockets. And so he has to go and accuse me of doing a dox when this guy is somebody who doxed my workplace, doxed my phone number, and doxed my friends' houses, and in fact tried to get one of my friends arrested. Tried to make up bullshit on one of my friends to get the SWAT team to come to his house. And now he's accusing me of doing doxing. Our community has literally kicked people out for the threat of doxing in the past. You can look that up. We actually did kick out a guy, Alex R., who threatened to dox my opponents, and we kicked him out, even though he was trying to help me. We kicked him out because we don't condone doxing. But look at this clown child. Oh, just snoozing and boozing, snoozing and boozing, snoozing and boozing.
So from Hawk Takes it says, Haas, do you admit that China has flaws like one child, which is leading to more old people and shrinking population?
They just recently reversed the one-child policy, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to get into Chinese people's business, but yeah, I mean, for America, I wouldn't want anything like that for America. But China was a different country; it had different developmental needs, and but they are reversing the policy, and it's not a one-child policy anymore. But yeah, there are demographic issues facing all developed and advanced countries. But I think if anyone is uniquely tasked to deal with this issue and confront it, it is the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm confident that they're going to be able to reverse their any impending demographic crisis.
I love that. It exposes the double standard where Haas is like, well, no, I wouldn't want that in my backyard, but for China, well, they have a state, so they can do their own thing. That's relativism. So it's freedom for me, but not for thee. So
no, it means that the Chinese people rule the Chinese people, and that I don't rule over the Chinese people. Well, actually, we have to get into the theory of governance and statehood and how a state actually represents its people. It's obviously not
theories. It sounds like you have a hard time.
It's not through individual atoms just directly controlling themselves. But the fact is, like, I'm not going to decide what policies the Chinese people pursue because that would require me, an American, to exert the power of America to rule over the Chinese people. And
no, not rule over, liberate.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Just like the Nazis liberated East Europe. Right, we get it. But the issue, Kevin, is that speaking of double standards, you spoke of the need for people to have absolute rights for minorities, and yet, interestingly enough, you said we need absolute rights for minorities. So let me get this straight. On the one hand, listen, look how hilarious Kevin is. On the one hand, he says that it's dictatorship when a government looks out for its people, but at the same time, Kevin thinks he knows what's good for the Chinese and North Korea people even better than themselves. He thinks he knows better than what it's. You literally just want to act as a dictator for the Chinese people. You want to act as a dictator for the Chinese people. It's
like, oh yeah, I worked out.
Yeah,
it's like, dude,
I do work out, Kevin. I do work out. Kevin, you want to act as a dictator for the Chinese people.
Okay. Yo, how's this?
Law school.
Am I turned up?
Law school.
All right, thank you. And Haas, something the way you're talking, it's really hard to understand what you're saying. But okay, from PF Jung, does Haas support gay marriage? What about legalizing weed? Just trying to gauge his personal beliefs on social issues.
I'm not against it, but I don't think it should be forced on any people. I believe in the sovereignty of countries and the sovereignty of nations and states. So it's up to the people living in those countries. Now, in America, the country I live in, I'm not against it. I will not pose resistance to it. But, you know, I'm not too interested in sexual politics in general.
Yeah, because he's not affected by it. So isn't that great? He's not affected by it. It doesn't personally affect him. Dude, you sound like one of those dumb Republican voters who doesn't care about something until it personally affects them. Absolute cringe.
I think that's how most human beings are in general. They stay in their own lane and they focus on what's in their business.
That's not true though. That's an absolute mischaracterization.
You are such a liberator.
Just because you're a sociopath, you're
such a liberator, dude.
The rest of people are. Just because you're a solipsist doesn't mean that the rest of people
first of all, when China acts on behalf of the Chinese people's best interests, it's a dictatorship. But when Kevin does it, it's liberation. That's apparently what we're working with.
If other people don't have the same rights that he has.
Yeah, when China intervenes on behalf of its people, it's a dictatorship. When Kevin intervenes on behalf of everyone in the world, it's liberation. That's what it is.
And ironically, yes, literally. Yeah. That's literally how it works.
Yeah, no, it's not.
That's literally how it works.
No one voted for you. No one voted for you. But no one voted for you.
All right. So from KGP, Kevin, as a self-proclaimed liberal war hawk, would you be willing to join the military and fight factions like the Taliban yourself?
Yeah, so I've been asked this question a ton of times. I've got videos that I've made going over this. When are you joining the military, though? It's a non-argument. It's basically the same as saying, dude, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You refuse to live to China. You refuse to live under the consequences of what you support. You refuse to live under the consequences of what you support. No. You're the coward. You're the one advocating for America to be like China, yet you refuse to actually live in a dictatorship yourself. You refuse to live in a dictatorship yourself. You refuse to live in a dictatorship yourself.
I would live in China. I would live in China.
Okay, so go fucking do it. So to answer this stupid question, I get asked this a lot. Dude, shut the fuck up. Dude, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Somebody mute Haas so I can actually answer.
Are you mad? Are you mad?
Let him answer.
Do this child bullshit.
Mute Haas. These questions.
Yeah, mute Haas.
Okay, just go. Just say what you're gonna say. Go.
Yeah, so basically, it's like saying to somebody, "Oh, well, you support the legalization of marijuana, but you're not a judge. You don't work in the court system. So therefore, how can you have an opinion on that? Oh, you're against crime, but you're not a police officer. How can you have an opinion on that? Likewise here. Oh, you have opinions on international relations, but you're not a soldier. Which, by the way, that doesn't even work because being a soldier and being a foreign policy analyst or being a foreign policy content creator are two different fields. You could do both. You could do one. You could do the other. The skills that go into being a soldier, the skills that go into studying international relations are two different. They're literally two different fields. As far as to answer the question of, well, what about the fight against the Taliban? what difference would it make? Like, let's say that I join the military tomorrow. Are we going to liberate North Korea and the Taliban? No, Canada pulled out in 2014. So how, like, it literally wouldn't make a difference. So in terms of the material difference of what that would do, it would do literally jack shit. I can do more here changing people's minds than I would trying to learn a new skill to go and fight the Taliban when we're not even fighting the Taliban.
Whose minds are you changing?
So whose minds am I changing? I hog kill people every week, dude. I hog kill people every week, and I'm going to be doing this for like 50 years, dude.
How many people?
How many people are you changing? How many
Way
people are
more
you
than you ever will
changing?
in your whole life.
But well, that's not true. You're probably changing a few more minds right now.
Not a few, Kevin.
50 years,
Kevin.
After you're like a D-rated.
Kevin, 800 people are watching me right now. It's quite a few more than
who just deep throats mics on.
Yeah, Kevin. It's not a few. It's quite a few. It's quite a few more.
I mean,
quite
you
a few.
Talk about your Westphalian fetish. This dude, he deep throats his mic as he gets off to the Westphalian.
You're getting dominated. That's what it's like to be dominated.
No, you got nuked. You got nuked.
You got dominated.
You got
dominated.
All right.
You got absolutely nuked. You got absolutely nuked.
All right.
From Pacquiao has spent a significant amount of his time and energy protecting gay and trans people in his server and community. What the fuck have you done, Kevin?
What have I done? Wait, hold on a second. He uses all kinds of, well, even if not himself, I've seen the people in his Discord using homophobic remarks, for example, that they directed those against me as I've been there before. This was months ago. There's a lot of homophobia, a lot of reductionism, and at the end of the day, he'll even tell you he really doesn't care or stand in solidarity.
He said class reductionism.
Shut the fuck up. He doesn't care about standing in solidarity.
He's a leftist.
No. He thinks it's a big joke. As far as what have I done? I've promoted the liberation and the empowerment of sexual minorities around the world, from Afghanistan to Iran to North Korea. And this guy here, he's all about his communism, but he will not go and live in China. He will not.
Why not? I live in China. I live in China.
Then do it. Prove it, dude. Prove it. Fucking prove it.
I can't get citizenship. They don't want me. They don't want me.
Then go and live in a different dictatorship. Get the fuck out of the West.
What will I be for them?
That you don't support.
I'm trying to make America communist.
So yeah. So you're a fifth column, and we should recognize you as the enemy. Okay. So
you live in Canada. You live in Canada. Focus on your own country.
You're fucking kidding me, dude.
We live in Canada.
We've kicked people out of our community.
You live in Canada, dude.
Bigotry towards LGBT minorities. I actually support LGBT people in China. Haas does not. He says he doesn't give a shit about
that. That's not true. What do you mean support?
You said you did.
How do you support what? Support what?
Gentlemen.
You give them money?
Gentlemen.
What do you mean?
Gentlemen, let's move on. We got it.
Right.
It's
so
all right.
From Black Lennon, question for Kevin. Do you deny the labor aristocracy? What do you think of it?
Define the labor aristocracy. Like, that seems like such a LARPy term. That seems like such a LARPy commie term, like labor aristocracy. What is that? The petty? Is that the petty bourgeoisie? Oh, look at this dude! Look at this dude! He's too afraid to go and live in a dictatorship. He's too afraid to go and live in a dictatorship. So fucking bullshit.
Saying that no one doxed your phone number. That number you posted was telemarketer number.
That's bullshit. I've gotten numbers from dozens upon dozens of different spoof phone numbers, leaving schizophrenic, demonic voice messages with the voice of that dude Kanzik earlier, that exact voice. You're going to try to tell me that it was a telemarketer who said, oh, that the neolibs were coming to your store tomorrow. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's not a telemarketer. So stop trying to gaslight me and stop trying to gaslight the audience here. That's fucking bullshit.
So from CP for SPP, if people reject human rights and the Western liberalism, would you be willing to treat them as equals? It sounds as if unless they adopt your values, you view them bad.
Yeah, so people don't reject human rights. Regimes speak on behalf of people.
They do actually.
No. That's bullshit, dude.
No,
you're so unbelievably
No-
unhinged.
no one-
you can't
no one
even
wants
stay quiet
your-
for 2
no-
seconds.
Yeah, yeah,
you
bro,
can't even stay
you
quiet
don't
for
see
2
the
seconds.
hypocrisy.
You
After that
loser.
question,
What about
Right.
you? What about you?
Right.
Constantly interrupting
You
me.
were a loser.
Because
You
both
can't
of
even
you
be
constantly-
quiet
You
for
had
2
to be
seconds.
kicked
Question
out.
was
You
not-
had to be kicked
question
out.
was
You were
not
interrupting me so much.
addressed at
Question was
you.
for Kevin.
The
Go
question
ahead.
was not addressed at you. So calm the fuck down, Haas.
Just answer it.
So to answer the question, shut the fuck up. To answer the question, shut the fuck up. The question was asking, dude, you're the one
Then
who
just
literally
talk.
wants to live
Don't tell
under
me
a
to shut the fuck up.
dictatorship,
Just talk.
but won't do it himself
Just
because
talk.
then he loses gaming PC and all that kind
Just
of bullshit.
talk. I don't game.
So,
That's okay.
You're the one who was like, "Oh, we want a $5,000 gaming PC." You literally said that
I did
on
not
that
pay
stream
what
where
the fuck?
you streamed my
5,000?
channel for 6 hours.
That's literally
talking
not
and
true.
fuming and dooming. No, it is
That's
true.
literally not
It's
true.
absolutely true, dude.
Prove
was
it.
your
Prove it.
nomadic-
Prove I paid
it was
5,000.
It was on your nomadic communism.
Prove
stream.
I paid
That's
5,000.
literally-
I paid
No,
5,000.
No, that's what you said. That's what
No,
you
I
said. That
didn't.
was,
No, I
was a
didn't.
while ago. No, that's anyway.
No, I didn't. I didn't pay.
What was the question
No,
again? What was
close to
the
that.
question was asking about people rejecting human rights? So people don't reject human rights. Nobody's about to be tortured in the middle of the night and says, I don't want Western habeas corpus. That's not a thing that happens. Dictators like Kim and Xi and the Ayatollah, they claim to speak for their people and say, no, we don't want that. That's not for our people.
They
Our
don't.
people are too stupid for
They don't want
democracy. That's like what Xi Jinping will say. But that's
No, he didn't say that.
But that's not a legitimate statement.
He never
They're
said
not
it.
actually representing their people.
Yes,
they're
it is.
lording over their people. And
Look at the opinion
managing a
polls,
massive
surveys
police
of the
state
Chinese people.
to keep them down.
Chinese people overwhelmingly support
this
government.
idea that Chinese people
Support the government
the idea
overwhelmingly.
that
They have
Chinese-
studies.
The idea that Chinese people, and communist-backed studies don't count. The
No,
idea
they're not
that
communist-backed. They're
the
Western-backed
idea-
studies.
The idea,
The Western press
Juche-
admits it.
The Juche study group, the Juche study
The
group.
Western press admits it. The Western press admits
They
it.
love the dear leader, bro. They love the fucking dear leader, bro. Give me a
Harvard?
fucking break,
Harvard?
dude, yeah, and there are commies that work in higher academia too.
Oh,
That's-
so
there
communists are the ones. Okay,
sympathizers-
got it.
There are sympathizers with China in various parts.
Is that
of
a Russian
society,
conspiracy
like you.
theory? That must be from a Russian
as
movie.
far as to answer the question,
All right.
as far as to answer the question that was posed to me and not posed to Haas, people do not reject human rights. Their oppressors speak for them and say they don't want that here. And then Westphalian deep throat Mike deep throaters like Haas will say, "Oh, it's their Westphalian."
The evidence says the contrary. The evidence says the contrary.
If
If you want to talk about me, then I'm here to talk. Finish your point. Why are you talking about me? Finish your point.
Nobody rejects human rights.
Yeah, the studies show they do.
Dictators reject
The studies show they do.
Dictators, only oppressors.
Yes, they do reject Western
that.
human rights.
This is not a
The
thing.
studies show it.
It's not a thing. That's
Yes,
not
it
a
is.
thing. And they've been brainwashed since they were born to parrot.
So they
the
do.
Communist
So they're
Party,
brainwashed, but
to
they do
parrot
support
the
it.
Communist Party.
They
No,
do
no,
support it.
no,
How are you saying they're brainwashed? He conceded. He conceded on the point. He conceded.
That is not a
He conceded.
I didn't concede. I didn't
Yeah,
concede.
you did.
I did not concede.
You conceded.
I did not concede.
He conceded
I
that
didn't
they were
concede.
brainwashed.
Would I
And that's the
support,
reason.
What I support
You
is
conceded.
world human rights, and that means you have to remove regimes from power that stand in the
Keep
way
trying.
of that. That means you have to remove regimes from power that
Couldn't even do
stand in the way of
Afghanistan.
that.
Let's shut it
These
down.
regimes are
Getting
not
to a point.
legitimate voices.
That's
That's
insufferable.
not a legitimate thing. I do not recognize their sovereignty. Sovereignty can be earned and it can be forfeited. The CCP forfeited their sovereignty. They do not have a legitimate voice here. And brainwashed people that say that under threat of death are not somebody that you would ask a serious opinion to. They're hostages and they must be liberated. So it's really as simple as that.
Yeah, they're under threat of death, guys.
Well, yeah, literally. And you deny the you deny the genocide.
Arrested journalists in 2020 in the world. So how can you believe their polls when they control the press internally?
Yeah, it has the most arrested journalists, but those journalists don't number that high in numbers. And second of all,
Who says journalists are a sacred class that cannot violate laws? Journalists who lie and smear and spread misinformation. I'm not against them being held accountable. So they should be tortured
and murdered? So they should be tortured
and murdered? No. The evidence doesn't say that they're being tortured and murdered, but that is the most they have. Listen. I want people to understand something.
Dude, look at Amnesty International.
And here's what's pathetic too. I just defended jailing journalists because I'm like an edgelord, but China doesn't do that. It doesn't really jail journalists. It just has the most journalists imprisoned in the world because, drumroll, China has the most people in the world.
No, it's a higher per capita. It's a higher per capita rate than America.
What's the rating per capita? Give me the specific number.
Far. We can look that up right now.
Look it up now. Journalists per capita arrested.
Because I know it's Russia and China are like right near the top.
Per capita.
We'll try to find this. So let's see.
I think move on to this next question while you do that.
So Eritrea is number 1. That makes a lot of sense. Who else is there? So Eritrea, we've got Syria, Iran. We've got where else is there? Oh, Turkey.
So it's not the most.
Well, no, China's in there.
It's not the most though.
So
you're wrong. You just conceded. It's not the most.
No.
Did you skip Israel?
The point is, but
you skipped Israel too.
You're missing. But here's the point that you're missing.
Why did you skip Israel?
No, but here's the point that you're missing.
Why did you skip Israel?
Here's the point that you're missing.
You skipped Israel.
Here's the point that you're
Israel's
missing.
on the list too.
Here's the point that you're missing. Even if one journalist
Israel is second. Israel's second on the list.
Even if one journalist,
Israel is on the second per capita on the list. Israel is second on the list, and you skipped it. Israel is second on the list, and you skipped it.
China is arrested.
Israel is second on the list, and you skipped Israel. Why did you skip Israel?
Arrested for their work and what they're doing and what
Israel. It was second on the list. You're pathetic.
No, you're pathetic.
Israel was second on the list.
Oh, yeah, let's make Israel look bad. Let's just smear Israel. Oh, fuck you, dude.
It was from the study you pulled up. You said China had the most fucking jail journalists per capita, and it doesn't.
I didn't say they had the most. I didn't say they had
the most.
Yes, you
did.
The person who wrote the comments said that they had the most. I was saying that they imprison journalists and torture and murder them. You initially denied it, but then you said, well, no, if they do it, it's okay.
It's not even at a high level. No, it's not. No, they don't.
But the point is,
how do they torture and kill them? Which journalist did China kill? Which journalist did China kill?
Just like in Russia.
Name the name of the journalist killed by China. Which journalist was killed by China? Which journalist? We're not talking about Russia right now. We can talk about Russia if you want.
Like in Russia, dude.
We can talk about Russia too, but which journalist was killed in China?
Dude,
for being a journalist.
I don't have the names right now.
Because you're talking out of your ass. Because you're talking out of your ass.
But the point is,
remember, Israel's number 2 in per capita.
No. But you admit that China does it. But then you say that you don't actually care because other countries do it, and because China's going to do what they're going to do.
What I said
that's bullshit, dude. That's absolute bullshit,
dude. What I said is that other countries are claimed to have freedom of expression, like Israel, but are higher on the list as far as per capita journalists.
So China at the moment, as of 2020, had 47 journalists in prison.
Oh my God, 47?
No. But see, you don't care because it's a tiny number.
1.4 billion people.
The point is,
by the way, 1.4 billion people.
That's so crazy because that's you admitting you don't actually care about rights. You just care about if it's a small number that get thrown under the bus.
The U.S. has more political prisoners than China.
You don't actually believe in rights for everybody. You just believe
there's no such thing.
Gets tortured,
rights for everyone doesn't exist in America.
Wait, so I want to move on.
Rights for everyone doesn't exist in America.
You heard the lady. You heard the lady. Kevin, what the fuck?
Okay. All right. So I want to move on to this question, and then I want to. We're gonna end it. I'm getting a headache. All right. So from CG, Iraq elected for no human rights. Afghans fought 20 years against human rights. Syria and Venezuela protected themselves from American human rights. Okay.
Okay, so this is a troll, but we could answer it anyway.
Oh, it's factual.
No. That's you're an absolute gullible goober. You're a gullible goober. You're gullible goober if you believe that, Haas.
You lost in Afghanistan.
That's bullshit. No. We didn't lose in Afghanistan. Biden's a weakling who pulled out. America was not defeated. Biden just lost.
You're scared to go.
Biden just lost the will to fight and gave up just like Trump. No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. America could still be there. America would still be there and could win. So that's bullshit. Yeah, well, I'm advocating for the West to go back in there. I'm advocating for the West to go back in there. I'm advocating for the West to go. Yeah, what is me enlisting going to do for that? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So that question. Can you bring the question up again?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up.
Yeah, this spaz here can't calm himself down. Unbelievable.
I think it might be too far up. I can pull it up another way though. Hold on.
Yeah, because I forgot what the question was asking.
Yeah. Okay. And then we're.
It wasn't a question. We're gonna
we're gonna do closing statements.
It was a stupid statement, but I forgot what it said. What were they saying?
It said Iraq elected for no human rights. Afghans fought 20 years against human rights. Syria and Venezuela protected themselves from American human rights.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So we'll go one by one. So Iraq.
No, we don't have time.
No. Shut the fuck up. I'm answering the question. I'm answering.
It's not a question. It wasn't a question.
No. But that's a bullshit statement. No. But that's a bullshit statement. So we're just gonna let that slide.
Because I'm gonna debate you on it. I'm gonna debate you on it. Then you don't have time.
Shut up. Dude,
just take the L. You're wrong.
I'm gonna answer.
You're wrong.
I'm gonna answer the state,
and I'm gonna fact check.
I'm gonna address.
I'm gonna fact check you.
So to the point about Iraq has been subverted by Iran.
It's an election. It was a free and fair election.
Shut up.
It was a free and fair election.
Shut up. I'm trying to answer the question.
It wasn't a question. That's the thing. It wasn't a question. It was not a question. It was a statement. No one cares if you agree or not. It was not a question. It was a statement.
Can you mute Haas right now?
Okay, Kevin, you have 30 seconds to say whatever you're going to say.
So as far as Iraq was subverted by Iran. Iran should have been invaded and liberated in 2003 as well. As far as Syria, 8 million people fled and had to flee and risk their lives to try to get human rights away from Syria. They rose up against Assad. The West supported that. As far as Venezuela, they're starving to death and they're moving out of the country right now or fighting. As far as the point about Afghanistan, it was 80,000 Taliban fighters fought America, not human rights, but America, and the rest of the country is lorded over by.
All right, that's 30 seconds.
Pakistani imperialism against India.
30 seconds.
That's all bullshit. That's all bullshit.
The 30 seconds are up. He just lied out of his teeth several times. It was all lies.
All right, moving right along.
We're gonna end this now. So we're gonna give you guys each 2 minutes uninterrupted. All right.
Uninterrupted.
So, Kevin, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. So basically, what we've seen tonight is that Haas over here is basically he's an unironic tanky who has said in this debate that he does not care when I point out instances of how communist China is anathema to freedom. He'll say, well, that's not what the majority want. He'll always use tyranny of the majority argument when it's not even a really good argument because the majority aren't able to actually have their voices heard anyway. Because at the end of the day, the Communist Party is about 10% or fewer of the country, and the elites in the party lord over everybody else. And if you don't play game, then you don't get out alive, basically, and you don't make it. And right now they're conducting a genocide where they have forcibly sterilized women. They've detained over 2 million people. And we in the West, in contrast, are islands of freedom, contrasted against continents of slavery, and particularly led by China right now. The West is worth fighting for. The West is worth promoting. The West is worth spreading to all corners of the world because we are the only system that guarantees you, no matter what you believe, no matter where you're born, human rights, democracy, freedom, and the ability to prosper or fail under capitalism. I support a safety net, but this idea that, oh, landlords, Haas at one point said, oh, but those are landlords. It's like, yeah, landlords are people too. Okay, I mean, hot take, but unbelievable. I believe in a free market system. The system in the West has been proven to be the best, and this is evidenced by the successes that China has had on an economic level were only enabled because we decided to do business with them. Now, I supported Nixon doing business with them because they were a useful ally against Soviet Union, but after the Soviets collapsed, they should have become the new enemy. But the neoliberal establishment here refused to do so because they wanted cheap child labor. So we in the West need to start acting in our interest, not in corporate interests, and actually get serious about combating China economically so that it doesn't come to a world war. We made them, we enriched them, and we can end them, and we can blockade them, and we can bankrupt them, and we can liberate them to a democratic liberal order. So thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to me on Twitch, Superpower Broadcasting. Follow me there. You can follow me on at Kevin Castley on Twitter.
Thank you.
So I guess the closing statement is this was a unanimous, unambiguous victory for Infrared. He got absolutely blown the fuck out. There's no question, there's no debate about that. But as just a quick closing statement, I think Kevin is a really good example of the fact that the question of the victory of multipolarity over unipolarity and over liberalism in general is not actually a question of contrasting discrete moral positions. It actually shows that liberalism is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. And the only evidence we need to see that is the fact that Kevin, while claiming to be an advocate for the so-called values of liberalism, at least as it was conceived in modern Europe and in the modern West as we know it, has to go above and beyond to transgress and violate the most basic liberal values of national self-determination and sovereignty. When Kevin speaks about how he wants to impose his specific worldview on the entire peoples of the world, regardless of what they think and regardless of what their say in the matter is, and he even wants to go out of his way to engage in a kind of nuclear holocaust against them, he doesn't sound like a liberal anymore. He sounds like he's Adolf Hitler. He has the passion and bombast of what anyone could clearly recognize is a fascist. Kevin claims that I don't care about the rights of the people living in China, but the axiom of a people being able to have any rights whatsoever is that a people can act as a people, can be sovereign as a people, and the organ and form of that sovereignty is a state, specifically a state, a people's state, which China is one of the only people states on planet Earth. It's a people's republic. It's a republic that is specifically defined for the purpose and aims, not of defending abstract sacred rights, but for the interests of the overwhelming majority of the Chinese people themselves. Kevin kept trying to interrupt me. I wanted to have this debate be more or less a little bit civil, but it got to a point where Kevin kept interrupting me so persistently and so often that I just had to come to the realization that this is a person who only understands the language of force and dominance. And in that regard, he was absolutely dominated and was absolutely forced to concede on every substantive point of contention, whether he's willing to admit that after the debate or not. The fact of the matter is that American unipolarity is on the decline. We're entering a multipolar world, and the West is no longer going to be the leader of the entire globe and the world. We have the Chinese civilization, the Russian civilization, the Islamic civilization, Brazilian and Latin American civilization, as well as Europe itself, in contrast to America, which are emerging as poles who represent different peoples with different interests. And the old era of European colonialism is done. It's as simple as that.
All right. Thank you, guys. So for people that are watching, we do have what we're doing lately is we are labeling blood sport debaters. So if there is blood sports and they both are okay with it, we'll let that go. If people are not wanting blood sports debates, we'll step in a little bit more. So these two are obviously blood sports debaters, so we kind of let them go at it. Other than that, thank you guys both for coming on. The poll is up in our community section, so you guys can go vote on who you think won. And tomorrow night we have a debate. I forget what it is on. I'm not even gonna
Omni and Dylan Blay.
Oh,
with,
yeah. It's on
prescription
prices. Haz, are you gonna be on for a bit? Because I was just gonna raid you if you are.
Raid me? Yeah, I'm gonna be going on a show, but yeah, we could use.
All right, so
I'm gonna be doing a post show too. So
yeah.
Are you on? All right.
I'm not on Twitch yet. I'll be going live in about 5 minutes.
All right, so I'm gonna raid you, and we are out, and we will see you guys tomorrow night at, I believe, 9 p.m. Eastern. So good night.
All right, bye bye.
Good night, people.
Take it easy. Thank you.